To the outside world, Ariji Kai looked like just another gloomy high schooler, quiet, antisocial, and easy to ignore. But beneath that dull exterior was something far more dangerous. He was a professional assassin, efficient, ruthless, and terrifying. None of his targets had ever lived to tell the tale. His classmates couldn't stand him. That cold attitude, that eerie aura, everything about him screamed, "Stay away." And they did, though not without the occasional bullying. He never reacted, never cared. But things didn't stay ordinary for long. One day, everything flipped. The entire class was suddenly transported to another world, a place built on swords and magic. There, a strange messenger appeared, claiming they'd all been summoned as heroes to defeat the Demon King. To help with the job, each of them was granted a superpower. Naturally, Ariji Kai ended up with the strongest one of all. But to understand how it all started, let's start the story from the beginning. A man was sprinting through a shadowy alley, panicked and desperate. Thinking he'd lost whoever was chasing him, he paused to catch his breath. A second later, cold steel touched his throat. He tried to bargain, money, mercy, whatever it took. But the blade didn't hesitate. The next morning, that same killer was just a high school student again, yawning on his way to school. Ariji Kai hated mornings, especially after a full night of work. As usual, the classroom buzzed when he walked in. Whispers, stares, nothing new. Midu Shuji, the ever-smiling class president and soccer ace, greeted him like always. Kai returned it with a blank stare and took his seat. Nearby, Nagase Rin, popular, stylish, always with something to say, watched the interaction and shook her head. To her, Kai was just being rude again. She told Shuji he shouldn't waste his energy on people like that. Shuji brushed it off, blaming tiredness. Then came the loud entrance of Erasure Shunsuke, the infamous gang leader and walking problem. A few students greeted him, but when he noticed Kai dozing off instead of acknowledging him, his ego took a hit. He marched over to Kai's desk, ready to start something. Kai didn't flinch. He caught Arashi's arm mid-motion, shut him down without even standing up, and went right back to sleep. Erasure, annoyed but unsure what just happened, muttered under his breath and backed off. Kinzaki Rin, the school's untouchable top beauty, finally spoke up, telling them to quiet down. Smart, skilled, and respected, she didn't need to raise her voice to get attention. Before Erasure could say anything to her, Hashimoto Mairi stepped in. Disciplinary committee type, rule-obsessed and dead serious, ready to go full enforcement mode. Narumi Yoshia, the class clown and certified loudmouth, joked that Erasure would flatten her. Eventually, everyone backed off. The classroom settled. This was Shinzo High School's first-year class, and on the surface, it was just another ordinary day. But beneath that calm was a classroom packed with tension, and Kai, as usual, kept his head down, trying to stay out of it all. That's when a strange sensation prickled beneath his skin, pulling his attention toward Shuji's feet. A bright blue light began to pulse from the floor. Within seconds, a magic circle took form, burning into the classroom tiles. Confusion spread fast the circle expanded, stretching across the entire floor. Shuji stepped up, trying to take control, telling everyone to get out. But Kai already knew they won't making it in time. The light flared violently, and then everything went white. When it faded, the entire class lay unconscious on the cold, stone floor of some ancient structure. Kai was the first to wake up, eyes scanning the unfamiliar space. Massive stone walls, towering pillars for cover, one narrow exit. It looked like a castle ripped straight out of an old RPG. One by one, the others began to stir. Panic followed chaos spreading. But Shuji, thankfully, stepped up again, calm, collected, the kind of guy who could pull the class back from the edge. Kai felt a bit more grounded, knowing Shuji was holding it together. Then Erasure jumped to his feet, all bravado, barking orders at his usual tag-alongs. But Kai shut that down fast. Something wasn't right. He could hear footsteps approaching from the other side of the door. Then the door creaked open. A girl and an old man stepped in, dressed like they walked straight out of a medieval fantasy. Long cloaks, intricate armor, outdated fashion, definitely not from around here. The girl, confident and composed, addressed the group, calling them hero candidates like it was the most natural thing in the world. The students didn't know how to react. Kai, meanwhile, was already analyzing. The old man moved like a trained sword user, his posture tight, his awareness sharp. The girl, on the other hand, had some tone to her frame, but nothing too threatening. Still, she didn't seem ordinary. She introduced herself as Leonora, Archbishop of the holy country of Digrest. The man beside her, Gauss, her knight and protector. Erishur didn't buy it. Never heard of that country, didn't trust a word. But she held her ground and told him she is not messing with them. Shuji stepped up again, explaining their side of things. No one understood what was happening, and the confusion wasn't helping. Leonora laid it out. They weren't dreaming. They had been summoned, dragged into a parallel world. According to her, they were humanity's last hope, chosen to defeat some so-called demon king. The title? Hero Candidates. No one wanted to believe it, but reality didn't leave much room for denial. Gauss warned Erishur to watch his mouth when speaking to the saint of the country, but Erishur didn't flinch. The lack of reaction was enough to make Gauss draw his sword, though Leonora quickly stepped in to calm him down. Still, Erishur lunged forward. Kai, watching from the side, couldn't help but be impressed by his guts. But before the attack could connect, Gauss flicked his sword with lightning speed, leaving a thin cut on Arashi's forehead. The strike was so fast, no one even saw it happen. Leonora offered an apology for Gauss's aggression and told them she'd explain everything, on the condition that they shut up and listen. Her tone shifted fast, calm to cold just like that. She laid it out. The Demon King's invasion had pushed humanity to the edge. The country of Digrest was still resisting, but they no longer had the strength to stop the invasion alone. Kai thought it sounded like every other doomsday story he'd ever heard. Leonora kept going. According to her, they were humanity's last hope. That didn't sit well with the students. Most of them had never even thrown a punch, let alone fought a war. Some of the girls had already started crying. Gauss told them it sounded impossible, but they had no choice, unless they wanted to stay trapped in this world forever. The shock hit hard, but Kai saw through it. Gauss wasn't just being honest. He was trying to light a fire under them. People who've only known peace can't just switch to killing overnight. They need more than words. They needed talent, training, and something to fight for. Erishur stood up, blood dripping down his face. He cursed them for treating them like pawns, and made it clear he hated every second of it. Gauss noticed something in him. His spirit hadn't cracked. A spark that might turn into something useful. He gripped his sword again, considering whether to end the trouble before it started. But then Leonora stepped in again. She was already healing Arashi's wound. She said the power she was using came from the system, granted to them by the gods. It was basically magic, simplified, so they'd understand. Kai caught the hint. She knew their culture too well to be guessing. This wasn't the first time someone from their world had been summoned. She walked over to Shuji, explaining that this system was the reason they'd all been brought here. She raised her hand, and suddenly Shuji's wrist lit up. A sort of pure light appeared in his grip. She said each of them could awaken their divine protection, innate powers tied to the system. She admitted it was selfish to call them here and then ask for their strength. But now that they were here, there was no going back. Shuji pointed out that power alone wouldn't change anything. They weren't ready to fight. Leonora agreed. They'd be trained, and during that time, they'd be protected. Shuji stepped up and took control. He knew everyone was on edge, but made it clear that the first thing they needed was intel and protection. The rest of the class listened. No one argued. When Leonora saw that the group was finally in sync, she started handing out divine powers. Murari got telekinesis. Erishur was handed explosion powers. Rina received fire, Yoshia got wind, and the rest were given their own flashy abilities. Each one different, each one powerful. Leonora asked if anyone was left. Kai raised his hand. She granted him his power, and right away, his vision began to shift. The moment it settled, he could read Leonora's stats like a status screen. His eyes turned red. She told him he got a rare ability, the power of judgment. It gave him access to other people's stats and details. Erishur tested his powers as well, and joked that Kai only got a change in eye color. Kai observed how his classmates were already acting arrogant, despite knowing nothing about this world and relying on powers that weren't even truly theirs. Still, he remained calm. After all, he had other ways to kill if it came to that. Once everyone had their powers, Leonora told them to take some rest. In the evening, the hero candidates were each escorted to their private rooms. But Kai, curious and restless, slipped out through his window to gather more information. Outside, the guards were patrolling and casually mocking the hero candidates, calling them weak and questioning how such kids were supposed to defeat the Demon King. One guard even suggested that the saint must know something they didn't. Kai quietly listened in, then used his judgment ability to scan one of the guards, discovering that he only possessed swordsmanship skills. Without drawing attention, Kai moved on, hoping to learn more. He also took note of the city's layout. It was a fortified structure, and the inner castle was tightly guarded, making infiltration difficult. Realizing it wasn't the right time, he decided to wait for a better opportunity. Meanwhile, in an open field, Rina and her 2 followers were testing their newly awakened powers, summoning elemental magic, while Rina pondered the nature of divine protection. Kai had followed them and was watching from a bush when he suddenly felt a strange energy. At the same time, the girls heard something rustling nearby. A massive, lizard-like creature appeared, drawn in by the magic. Kai immediately checked its stats and was shocked by how powerful it was. The beast roared and lunged at the girls. Kai quickly noticed it was strong and aggressive, but not very smart. It only charged in straight lines. He hurled a knife that managed to pierce the creature's thick hide. As the girls fled, Rina tripped and fell. Just as the monster was about to stomp her, it froze. A knife was buried deep in its head, blood oozing out. The girls were confused but didn't wait around. They fled the scene. Kai hadn't planned to help them, but his conscience wouldn't let him walk away. He realized if such monsters were lurking freely, things weren't going to be easy. As he went to retrieve his knife from the beast's corpse, he suddenly felt a presence nearby. He hid behind the body, scanned the area, but saw nothing. Not wanting to risk it, he returned to his room quietly. After he left, a mysterious figure stepped out from behind a wall. His face hidden under a robe, the person crushed the monster's skull with bare hands, squeezing out its eyes. Disgusted, they muttered about how pathetic the hero candidates were, but noted that Kai smelled just like him. The next morning, Gauss brought the corpse of the monster to the hero candidates, leaving them stunned. He explained that the creature had been found dead near the royal capital the night before. Gauss revealed that the Demon King had driven monsters into a frenzy, making them crave human flesh. He warned the students that they'd be up against monsters like this. Turning to Steady, the group's researcher, Gauss asked if he noticed anything unusual. Steady replied that the creature bore traces of sorcery, likely cast by a mid-level or higher demon. He suspected the demons were scouting to evaluate the new hero candidates. Kai grew curious about the word sorcery, wondering how it differed from magic. Shuji asked if that meant the monster had been controlled. Steady explained that powerful demons could use servitude spells to control weaker monsters. Before Steady could go into more detail, Gauss dragged him away. Still, Kai thought Steady's insights could be useful and appreciated his help. That's when a realization struck him. Those eyes he had sensed the night before belonged to a demon. Whoever it was, they were good at hiding, and Kai suddenly felt like someone was watching him again. Meanwhile, Erasure told Gauss that killing the demon was the only way to return home, and he had no intention of staying in this world. The others agreed. Kai believed it was important for them to quickly understand the harsh truth. Just then, Leonora entered and reassured them, saying they only lacked proper training. Since they were from another world, their growth potential was different, and with time, they'd improve. A week later, the students were deep into their training. Kai, however, wasn't suited for battle due to his judgment-type ability, so he was allowed to study in the library. He'd already learned the new language and found it odd how easily they could all communicate. But books about the world's history, culture, or demons were scarce. Among the students, the top 5 were Narumi with wind control, Erasure with explosion powers, Kinzaki using telekinesis, Hashimoto with earth powers, and Rina with fire. Yet Shuji stood out the most. He advanced faster than even his instructors. Using his ability, Kai saw that all of Shuji's stats had jumped from below D grade to above B grade in just a week. Suddenly, 2 boys approached Kai and started mocking him. He noticed others were beginning to look down on him too, their new powers making them cocky. When one tried to push him around, Kai swiftly threw him to the ground without making a scene. Meanwhile, Leonora and Gauss arrived at the training grounds, and Leonora announced that since everyone had progressed faster than expected, they'd be accelerating their plans. When Narumi asked if they were being sent to face the Demon King, Leonora denied it, explaining that they'd now begin practical monster combat training instead. The announcement made everyone nervous. The next day, Gauss and Leonora led the hero candidates deep into a forest filled with obstacles. Since it was difficult to move as a large group, Gauss explained they'd be split into teams of 2 or 3. The candidates quickly formed their own teams, leaving Kai and Kinzaki with no choice but to pair up. Kai observed that she seemed confident, indifferent, and quite proud. She even caught him staring. Leonora then added that the team who defeated the most monsters would earn a surprise reward. With that, the drills began. On the way, Kinzaki told Kai she didn't need his help since her powers far surpassed everyone else's. She warned him not to get in her way. Kai agreed and said he'd stay out of it. She asked if he had no pride, but before he could answer, he sensed 4 hidden enemies. One monster charged, and Kinzaki used her ability, Domination, which allowed her to control her targets with commands. She ordered the goblin to bow, and it obeyed. But the power drained her, and she explained that prolonged use consumed a lot of mana. When Kai told her to just kill the goblin, she hesitated, saying it looked too human. Kai reminded her it was still a monster that had attacked them. He figured she was just a naive Japanese student who used a piece. As he toyed with a stone, the remaining 3 goblins appeared. Kinzaki again ordered them to bow and asked Kai to do something. He reminded her that she'd told him not to interfere. Frustrated, she commanded the goblins to twist their own necks, killing them instantly. Kai was stunned by the brutal effectiveness of her ability, and she explained that the more complex the command, the less likely it would work. Disgusted by the dead goblins, Kinzaki looked disturbed. Kai comforted her, offering calm reassurance. She asked how he could stay so composed without any powers, and he simply said that this was his strength. When he asked if she wanted to back out, she firmly refused, though he knew she was just trying to look tough. Still, he had to admit, she wasn't so bad. Meanwhile, Narumi and Hashimoto were desperately trying to escape from a monster that was way too powerful for them. But fleeing wasn't really an option, so they decided to fight back together. Combining their wind and rock powers, they hurled a massive boulder at the beast, but it barely left a mark. They were completely outmatched and had no clue what to do next. Kinzaki, on the other hand, was deep in thought. She didn't want to die before repaying her grandfather for raising her. She hadn't even shown him how much she'd grown. As she zoned out, Kai snapped her back to reality, asking if she wanted to keep going since they might get lost. The two exchanged playful jabs, and Kinzaki couldn't help but wonder why Kai was so mysterious and stubborn. Just as they were messing around, a loud cry echoed nearby. Kinzaki immediately recognized Hashimoto's voice. Kai asked what they should do, and Kinzaki said the answer was obvious. They had to help. Meanwhile, Hashimoto had been thrown several feet by the monster and was badly injured and bleeding. She begged Narumi to run, but it was too late. The monster was coming for him next. That's when Kinzaki stepped in, using her powers to stop the monster in its tracks, even if just temporarily. Narumi thanked her, but she warned that the monster was far too powerful to hold off for long. Kai asked if Hashimoto was still alive, and Narumi confirmed she was barely. Kai told him to carry her and get out while they could. Though reluctant, Narumi obeyed. Once they were gone, Kai used his abilities to check the monster's stats and was shocked by its high defense. His attacks wouldn't do much. He also realized it was a mutant and wasn't sure what kind exactly. Kinzaki yelled that she couldn't hold it back any longer. Kai told her she'd bought them enough time and that they needed to retreat too. She agreed but had collapsed, her energy completely drained. She couldn't even stand. Seeing how bad things were, Kai pulled out a smoke grenade and set it off. The cover gave him just enough time to scoop Kinzaki up and hide. She blushed a little, flustered from being carried. When she asked about the smoke, Kai said it was a grenade he'd made during training, which was a lie. He'd actually had some assassin gear with him before being summoned and was trying to use it sparingly. Feeling guilty, Kinzaki apologized since it was her idea to go save the others, and now she was the one being rescued. Kai told her not to apologize. She could just thank him again. Their usual banter continued until she suggested they run. But just then, they saw Shuji and the rest of the group arrive. Without hesitation, Shuji charged at the monster, furious that it had hurt his friends. He managed to injure its hand, and Rina followed up with her fire powers, which only slowed a little. The group launched into another attack, but they weren't alone. Watching from a distance was Delphi's, a veteran assassin demon. Smirking, he commented on how fast the hero candidates were growing. The armored brute couldn't take them down, and Delphi's admired Shuji's composure. What was meant to be a scouting mission was about to become something much more deadly. He had decided to eliminate them then and there. While Shuji and the others managed to defeat the monster, Delphi's watched with a grin and was just about to strike, until a dagger pressed against his neck stopped him cold. It was Kai. Caught off guard, Delphi's froze in shock, unable to comprehend how Kai had sneaked up behind him. He immediately began thinking of a way to escape. But before he could act, Kai slashed his legs and threw him to the ground, warning him to stay quiet so the others wouldn't notice. Kai told Delphis that if he answered a few questions, he might let him go. Though Delphis didn't want to comply, he had no choice. Kai clearly held the advantage. Kai asked if Delphis had been the one watching him the other night, revealing that he had deliberately let Shuji and the others fight the monster to draw the observer out. Delphis smirked and refused to talk, but Kai didn't hesitate. He slashed his hands and warned that cooperation would make things easier. Delphis snapped back, telling Kai not to underestimate him, then suddenly swallowed poison he had hidden, killing himself on the spot. Kai realized the Demon King's army wasn't going to be easy to deal with. Just then, Kanzaki showed up, surprised to see a corpse at Kai's feet. When Kai asked how long she had been watching, she said since the moment Delphis hit the ground. Kai explained that the dead man was an assassin from the Demon King's forces, and the monster they'd fought earlier had been his pawn, just like the first lizard monster. Kanzaki grew nervous, realizing that the Demon King was targeting hero candidates. She asked how Kai had seen through the assassin when no one else did. He figured it wasn't worth hiding anymore and told her the truth. His family came from a long line of assassins, and he could smell others in the same trade. Kanzaki was stunned by this revelation. Kai told her it was up to her whether to believe him or not, but asked her to keep quiet about the body, since the others were already shaken by Hashimoto's condition. She agreed, surprised to see how much Kai cared. He shrugged it off, saying it was just because the others weren't used to real battles yet. Meanwhile, all the hero candidates had gathered around Hashimoto, who was seriously wounded. A student named Hano, who possessed healing powers, knelt beside her and began treating her injuries. Everyone watched in awe as Hano confidently announced that Hashimoto would recover in about an hour. The group started praising Shuji for taking down the monster when suddenly Leonora and Gauss arrived. The others immediately questioned where they had been and why they hadn't helped. Gauss explained that he had been observing the entire time, but stepping in every time wouldn't help them grow. Shuji argued that the situation had been critical. Hashimoto could have died. Gauss simply replied that risking one's life was part of military training, and they had to get used to that level of danger. Shuji then asked how an armored monster had appeared in an area said to contain only weak creatures. Leonora chimed in, suggesting that the assassin's interference might have been the reason, since armored monsters weren't supposed to show up there. Gauss and Leonora decided they needed to tighten security, unaware that Kai had already eliminated the threat. Leonora also insisted that the students needed more intense training. At their current level, they'd never survive real combat. Her words left everyone uneasy, but when Shuji tried to reason with her, she firmly stated that the only way to stay alive was to get stronger. Erasure didn't like being bossed around, so he tried to confront Leonora. But before he could, Gauss stopped him and reminded everyone that they were merely pawns of Leonora. They had no right to defy her orders. The tension in the room was rising fast. Shuji stepped in, trying to calm Erasure down, pointing out that they really had no choice but to follow orders. Gauss, impressed by Shuji's composure, reassured them that as long as they behaved, nothing bad would happen. After all, they were valuable pawns to the country. Still, Erasure wasn't having it. In a burst of rage, he launched an explosive attack at Gauss. But Gauss dodged swiftly and retaliated with a brutal punch, knocking Erasure to the ground. He coldly remarked that they were all weak and warned them that things would only get harder from the next day. With that, he and Leonora walked away. Erasure stood up, face bleeding, and swore he'd kill Gauss the next day. The following day, Steady, the researcher in charge of their training, had a quick discussion with them about what happened. He then revealed that they would be fighting monsters at his research facility. Inside, all kinds of monsters were kept for his experiments. Soon, the training began, and the hero candidates were thrown into monster battles. Kai noticed that, surprisingly, everyone was calm despite being forced into this. Shuji told Steady that the monsters felt too strong for the candidates, but Steady responded that Leonora had ordered strict training. He had no intention of going easy on them. With powers like theirs, he said, they shouldn't be losing at all. And more importantly, their willpower was what mattered most. Shuji asked if that really made a difference. Steady replied that if they did it right, they could level up their abilities and even unlock new variations of their powers. Kai then joined the conversation, telling Shuji that his judgment power revealed that Shuji had awakened a new ability. Surprised, Shuji asked Steady if he could test it. Curious to see it in action, Steady agreed. Shuji activated his new power and, in one clean move, sliced off the monster's hand and head. Kai realized that Shuji wouldn't have trouble facing armored monsters anymore. He also started wondering if his own judgment powers had leveled up too. That's when he noticed someone else had awakened a new power, Erasure. But he chose not to tell him for now. Later that night, Erasure was secretly plotting to kill Gauss, tie up Leonora, and force her to reveal a way back to their real world. A few other candidates agreed with his plan, eager to escape this world too. Erasure asked Narumi to join them because they would have a better chance together, and he knew Narumi was also tired of that world. Narumi hesitated, but eventually decided to join. The next day, Shuji was training when Kai approached him and complimented his hard work. Shuji replied that he was still weak and needed to improve. Kai told him that with his current strength, he could defeat half the knights in that world. Shuji said that wasn't enough since he still couldn't defeat Gauss and needed more power to protect everyone. Kai then asked Shuji what he thought of Leonora and Gauss. Shuji said he knew they were using the candidates as pawns in their battle, but believed they wouldn't harm them. Kai asked if that meant Shuji was willing to risk his life until the Demon King was defeated. Shuji agreed, saying he had made up his mind, but insisted he would be the only one to fight. He planned to become the country's hero, defeat the Demon King, and try to negotiate so everyone else could live safely. Kai asked if Leonora would allow that, and just then, Leonora and Gauss walked in. Leonora told Shuji he would be in charge of the candidates' training while she was away. Shuji gladly accepted his role. After Leonora and Gauss left, Gauss asked if she was sure she had made the right choice. She asked what made him doubt it. Gauss warned her not to play games and to be direct. He added that Erasure was stirring something up, and she agreed, saying it might be a rebellion against them. Gauss asked what her next move would be, and she said she was curious to see what Erasure and the others would do next. Gauss was a bit worried about the rebellion since the hero candidates had powers and could cause serious trouble. But Leonora remained calm, confident they could never defeat her. She said they should create a hierarchy to crush the rebellion and break their fangs once and for all. She also mentioned she noticed some other suspicious things, but decided to leave those aside for now. Later that night, Kai was fighting another monster. He killed it the same way he had taken down the one on the first night, fast and efficient. It only took him 13 seconds. When he used his judgment ability on himself afterward, he realized he had leveled up. But just then, another monster appeared. This one was tougher, and his blades couldn't pierce its body. It was the perfect moment to try out his new skill. He activated his ability, which allowed him to detect the enemy's weak spot. Once he found it, he killed the monster in the blink of an eye. The skill wasn't bad, but he knew it still wasn't enough to survive in that brutal world. He needed to become even stronger. More monsters came at him, but he took them down with ease. He needed something more challenging to truly test his power. That's when he heard human footsteps. It was Kinzaki. She asked what he was doing out there so late at night. Kai responded by asking what she was doing there instead. She told him she came looking for him since he wasn't in the dorm. He warned her that the forest was dangerous at night, especially for someone not used to nighttime battles. But she cut him off and asked what he was even doing out there. He told her he was testing a new power. When she asked what that power was, he started teasing her instead. She eventually admitted that she was worried about him. Embarrassed, she blushed and started coming up with excuses. As they were talking, they noticed smoke rising in the distance. Something was on fire. They rushed back and saw that the dorm was in flames. Other candidates were already fighting monsters. Narumi told them he was relieved to see they were safe. He said that when he woke up, the building was already burning, and monsters had shown up. Kai suspected a human was behind it all and believed the culprit had to be nearby. He told them to find whoever was responsible. Just then, Steady appeared on top of a building and commended their judgment. Kai said he had been wondering how the monsters showed up, but now it made sense. They were all from Steady's lab. Steady revealed he had given them some kind of enhancement drug to boost their power, since they were originally too weak. Kai asked him what the point was. What did he gain by killing other candidates? Steady said it was a direct order from above. He had been told to eliminate the candidates, even if it meant sacrificing his current position. He claimed he had nothing personal against them, but still, he had to kill them. When they asked if Leonora was behind the order, he denied it, saying it wasn't that Vixen's command. The order had come from the Demon King himself. Steady was a spy working for the Demon King. If he succeeded, he'd be offered a position as a researcher in the Demon King's realm. Kai was stunned. Had Steady really fallen so far into darkness that all he cared about was experimenting on monsters? But Steady insisted that monsters were beyond human understanding. Then he ordered his monsters to attack. Kinzaki tried to stop them using her powers, but they broke through her spell in no time and went after her. Kai jumped in and saved her, which got Steady excited. He was impressed by Kai's strength. Kai continued the fight, cutting down nearly a dozen monsters. Steady was now furious, especially since Kai didn't even have an exceptionally strong ability. Kai then used his judgment power on Steady and saw that his stats were terrible. But something else stood out. Steady also possessed domination powers, just like Kinzaki, only much stronger. That explained why Kinzaki's magic hadn't worked earlier. Shaken, Steady was forced to use a power he hadn't wanted to reveal. He told Kai he'd find out what it was soon enough. As Kai leapt into attack, determined not to waste a second, a massive red dragon suddenly appeared and blasted fire at him. It was Steady's trump card. The dragon began hurling huge boulders at them. Kai told Narumi to take Kanzaki and get out of there, as another attack was coming. Once again, Kai used his power to find the dragon's weak spot, which turned out to be its neck. He tried to strike it, but his attack power wasn't strong enough to land a fatal blow. Suddenly, Erishur showed up, attacked the dragon, and started bragging about how he could actually hurt it, but the dragon quickly counterattacked. Kai told Erishur they needed to work together to bring the beast down. Erishur questioned why Kai would need his help, and Kai explained that while he could detect the dragon's weak points, he didn't have the attack strength to take advantage of them. Still acting stubborn, Erishur insisted he didn't need help from a rookie like Kai. But there was no time to argue. The dragon attacked again, spewing fire at Erishur. That finally made Erishur agree to team up. Kai told him the weak spot was a single scale on the dragon's neck. They formed a quick plan. Kai would grab its attention, and Erishur would strike at the weak point. Meanwhile, Steady ordered the dragon to kill them. The dragon charged, and Kai successfully distracted it, while Erishur went for the target. The attack hit, bringing the dragon crashing to the ground, defeated. Kai turned to Steady and asked if he had anything else left, now that his trump card had failed. Steady replied that he did have other monsters, but unfortunately, Shuji and the rest had already taken care of them. As Steady tried to escape, Narumi caught him. Kai demanded answers, and the terrified Steady immediately agreed, too scared to resist. But just as he was about to reveal the truth, his body turned purple and he dropped dead. A curse had been placed on him, one that would kill him the moment he tried to leak any information. The next day, the candidates confronted Leonora when she returned, since she was the one who had left Steady in charge. She apologized and explained that she never expected a weak demon tamer like him to cause such chaos. The candidates were stunned to learn that she already knew Steady was a demon tamer. They questioned her. If she was aware of his identity, why did she let him stay so close to them? In her defense, she reminded them that she had already warned them their training would be tougher, and what happened was simply part of that. Gauss then blamed the group for not being cautious enough to notice a fire in the night. Leonora told them that next, they would all be heading to the royal capital for the public reveal of the hero candidates. A grand parade would be held there, and they would be the main highlight of the event. That evening, they set out for the capital, and by nightfall, they camped in a field. While eating, Erishur spoke to his followers, noting that there were only about 30 soldiers accompanying them, and they weren't very strong. He said it was time to put their plan into motion, as they had the numbers to overpower them. He then asked one of his men to call Narumi and his group over. Kai, who had overheard the conversation, agreed that the soldier count was low, but understood it was because Gauss and Leonora were confident they could handle any threat themselves. Kai went to Shuji and asked if they could talk later. That night, Erishur and Narumi met in a nearby forest, ready to ambush the soldiers. But Shuji and the other candidates showed up to block their path. Shuji revealed he had heard about Arashi's plan to assassinate Leonora and Gauss, leaving Erishur shocked that his plan had somehow been exposed. The others tried to reason with him, suggesting there had to be a better way than murder. Erishur snapped back, accusing Shuji of only talking and having no real plan. But Shuji said he was willing to become a pawn and defeat the Demon King in exchange for everyone's safety. Erishur rejected the offer and told him to move aside. But Shuji and the others refused to let him pass, and with no agreement possible, a fight broke out. Suddenly, 2 soldiers arrived and ordered them all to go to sleep, reminding them they had to travel early in the morning. Erishur, frustrated, walked off, saying he was done with weakness and saw no point in talking further. The next day, they all arrived at the royal capital, which was packed with people because of the upcoming ceremony. The streets buzzed with excitement as citizens caught glimpses of the hero candidates, clearly placing a great deal of faith in them. At the castle, they were warmly welcomed by Holy Knight Rhaenys, who suggested they rest first. The candidates were delighted by the royal hospitality. Fluffy beds, relaxing hot water baths, and delicious food were all laid out for them. Kai, however, had other plans. He wanted to gather more information, but the castle was crawling with guards. While looking around, he spotted Rhaenys, the knight who had been showing them around, talking to his soldiers. Rhaenys mentioned that the hero candidates were far stronger than other children their age. One soldier expressed concern that bringing the candidates into the capital might provoke the demons to make a move. Rhaenys reassured them, saying the candidates were strong enough to handle anything. Kai's curiosity only deepened, so he decided to sneak out into town at night. He stopped by a pub, ordered some ale and snacks, and listened in on conversations. People were talking about the hero candidates, surprised at how ordinary they looked. But what caught his attention most was how fearful everyone seemed, not of the king or nobles, but of the church. Kai asked the bartender for more information, pretending to be new in town. The bartender told him about the Demon King, who had been attacking the kingdom and could even seduce humans with overwhelming power. He also mentioned how the Demon King's followers had recently blown up a noble's estate. Kai left the pub deep in thought, realizing that bringing the candidates into the capital might not have been the smartest move. Suddenly, Kinzaki showed up, worried about him. He explained that he was just gathering information since they were in unfamiliar territory. She offered to help, but he initially refused, which irritated her. After a bit of back and forth, he finally agreed to let her help and asked her to gather information about the royal capital. They both went their separate ways to investigate, unaware that someone had been eavesdropping on their entire conversation. The man smirked as he watched her leave. Later, Kai returned to his room after a long, unfruitful search. He hadn't found anything crucial, but he did learn about the presence of a new enemy. Suddenly, he heard noises outside and found the other candidates gathered in the hall. That's when he learned that Kinzaki had gone missing. Since Kai didn't share a room with anyone, no one noticed his absence either. When questioned, he denied knowing anything. Shuji concluded that she must have left the castle, and with dawn approaching, they all split up to search for her. While searching, Kai spotted her student ID lying on the street. As soon as he picked it up, masked men ambushed him. But his reflexes were sharp. He quickly took down 3 of them. The 4th one, clearly an inexperienced spy, froze in fear. Kai stopped him and demanded to know who he was and what he knew. Meanwhile, in what appeared to be a castle, Kanzaki was tied up and being held captive. 2 spies were interrogating her, demanding information about the hero candidates, but she refused to say a word. When they realized she wasn't going to cooperate, one of them tore her shirt. What they didn't know, though, was that Kai had already infiltrated the place and was secretly watching everything. Using his judgment powers, he quickly assessed that the 2 spies were actually pretty weak. He couldn't believe someone like Kanzaki had been captured by such low-level enemies. Without wasting time, he killed them both. Kanzaki, now exposed, was embarrassed to see him. He freed her from the chains and was about to leave with her when he suddenly sensed someone rapidly approaching. It was Rhaenys, the Holy Knight. Without hesitation, Rhaenys launched an attack, but both Kai and Kanzaki managed to dodge it. With a smile, Rhaenys declared that he would have to kill them. Aside from being a Holy Knight, he was also the general of the Demon King's army. Kai commented on how the country was already on the brink of collapse, especially with enemies roaming freely even in the capital. He used his judgment ability again and realized that Rhaenys was an all-rounder and a powerful warrior. The 2 clashed, and Kai narrowly avoided Rhaenys' sword. But then, Rhaenys used fire magic, catching Kai off guard. He barely dodged the flaming attack, only for Rhaenys to coat his sword in fire and announce that it was over for Kai. But Kai quickly pulled out his gun and shot Rhaenys straight in the temple. Rhaenys collapsed and died instantly. Kai hadn't wanted to use his gun for something like that, especially since he only had limited bullets, but he had no other option. He realized that if he wanted to survive in this world, he had to get better at close combat. Kanzaki was shocked to see him with a gun and admitted it was scary knowing someone from their class had brought one. Kai explained that it was standard equipment for an assassin. She thanked him, and he asked why she hadn't used her domination powers. She replied that once her hands were chained, her powers were somehow disabled. As they prepared to leave, Kanzaki mentioned that those spies were planning to attack everyone in their class. But Kai already knew. He had interrogated a 4th man he captured earlier, and that guy revealed their orders to kill all the hero candidates. He was also the one who told Kai where Kanzaki was being held. The plan was to use her as a hostage during the attacks. What was truly strange, though, was that the man Kai had interrogated hadn't died from the death curse like Steady had. That meant it wasn't the work of a demon. It meant there were humans working against them. It was almost morning when Shuji found them, relieved to see her safe. Kai explained everything to him about the Demon King's cult, and how even humans had turned against humanity. The problem now was that they couldn't easily tell who their enemies were anymore. Unlike monsters, these were people, making it harder to identify threats. This meant they all had to be extra careful. They decided not to inform Leonora, knowing she'd just tell them to figure it out themselves. So instead, they planned to gather everyone and decide what to do next. But before they could, a strange smoke surrounded them, and cult members emerged from the fog. Everyone prepared to fight. Not just this group, but other candidate teams were ambushed too. Kai noticed there were 6 cult members, and although their stats were lower than Rhaenys, they were still formidable. As the 6 men charged at them, Kanzaki used her powers to freeze them in place, and Kai quickly finished them off by stabbing them in the head. Shuji felt uneasy. After all, they were still human. He started to argue, but Kai cut him off, reminding him that enemies were enemies, no matter what. Just then, one last cult member lunged at Shuji. He tried to reason with him, but the man said he was simply following his master's will. Kanzaki got ready to act again, but Kai stopped her. He wanted Shuji to handle it. Shuji broke the man's sword and gave him a chance to surrender, but the cultist refused and struck Shuji, wounding his hand. In retaliation, Shuji slashed him back. As the man whimpered on the ground, Shuji hesitated, wanting to leave him to die slowly. But Kai insisted. He had to kill him right there, or the man could become a future threat. Reluctantly, Shuji did what he was told. Meanwhile, Erishur and his squad also defeated their enemies. Erishur killed the last one without mercy. Rena and the other girls were struggling. They found it hard to kill humans, and aside from Rena, most of them were getting hurt. Suddenly, Leonora appeared and casually asked if she should consider giving them a passing grade. The cultists grew furious at the sight of her. She coolly said that since they were candidates, it was only natural she'd appear to help when they were in danger. One of the cultists mocked her, saying she didn't even have her knight with her, so how could she protect anyone? But Leonora just smirked, calling them nothing but weaklings manipulated by the Demon King. She didn't even see them as worthy enemies. When all the cultists rushed at her, she used her domination skill to pin them to the ground. They couldn't move a muscle. Rena, surprised, noted that Leonora's ability resembled Kanzaki's, but Leonora quickly corrected her, saying her domination was far superior in every way, be it range or power. Rena asked why she'd saved them, and Leonora replied that she'd already mentioned giving them a passing grade. They all thanked her for stepping in. One of the cultists, still alive, clutched at her dress, begging not to be ignored and asking for mercy. She looked down and calmly apologized for the fact that he was still breathing. Then, she used her domination on all the candidates and commanded them to kill the restrained cultists. Their bodies moved against their will, and they were forced to slaughter the cultists, proof of just how terrifying Leonora's power truly was. Kai and Kanzaki were observing everything unfold from distance. Kanzaki was stunned by how Leonora could control so many people at once. Her range and power were on an entirely different level. 12 hours after the attack, all the candidates regrouped in the hall. Many of them were in rough shape and visibly shaken. Narumi declared that he wouldn't forgive Leonora for forcing the candidates to kill against their will. Shuji blamed himself for not arriving in time, but Kai told him it wouldn't have changed anything. None of them were strong enough to resist Leonora anyway. Kai was certain that with the demon army's general defeated, their enemies wouldn't be able to act for some time. He then asked Kanzaki to come with him. When she asked why, he said he needed help from someone with powers similar to Leonora's to find a way to counter her domination magic. Then he asked her to use her powers on him. Hearing that, Kanzaki turned red and flustered. The day after they fended off the cult members, the kingdom held a grand parade to celebrate the summoning of the hero candidate Kates. It was recognition of the candidates' strength, shown during their battle with the Demon King's cult. The citizens of the royal capital welcomed them warmly. Later, when the candidates gathered again, Leonora said she wanted them to return to Temple City Alpha. Kai explained that it was the city they were originally summoned to, and suspected it was under Leonora's control. Shuji asked if Leonora would be coming along, but she said she had other matters to handle and would leave them under Gauss's care. Rina expressed a desire to return, but pointed out that their dorms had been burned down. She also noticed one girl looking pale and too terrified of Leonora to even speak. Leonora left with a smug grin, and the candidates were left harboring resentment toward her. Soon after, Gauss led them toward their next destination. That night, they made camp, and Erasure along with the others went into the forest again. Kinzaki asked Kai if they were really going through with it that night. He confirmed they were. Leonora wasn't around, and the soldiers were just weaklings. It was the perfect opportunity to kill Gauss, and under those conditions, Kai had no reason to stop them. In fact, he was just planning to sit back and enjoy the show. Meanwhile, Narumi had lured Gauss deep into the forest, claiming he had seen a giant monster. Gauss fell for it since the path led to the royal capital, and a monster near that area would have been a serious threat. But suddenly, Erasure ambushed him from behind with full force. Caught off guard, Gauss took the hit and started bleeding. Erasure mocked him, saying that even Gauss's strongest attack couldn't kill him. Barely able to stay on his feet, Gauss accidentally stepped on a landmine, which exploded. Erasure grinned and revealed it had all been a trap set for him. Gauss used his mana to shield himself, but the explosion still left him badly wounded. Disappointed, Gauss told Erasure he didn't expect such a sneaky attack from him. Just then, the rest of Arashi's group surrounded Gauss. Realizing how serious things had gotten, Gauss threw a glowing orb into the sky. It worked like a fireworks signal. From a distance, Kinzaki and Kai spotted it. Kai commented that Erasure had gone too far. The signal was actually a distress call, which nearby soldiers noticed and started moving in that direction, but Kai intercepted them and killed them all before they could reach. Back in the forest, Gauss was getting overwhelmed by the candidates. He struggled to keep up with their power and was eventually pushed to the limit, losing one of his arms and bleeding all over. Erasure, somewhat impressed, said Gauss was tough for his age. Narumi then mentioned the distress signal, saying he was just trying to buy some time. But Gauss calmly said it was no longer needed. That's when Leonora appeared, smiling as usual, noting how Gauss had been cornered. The candidates were shocked by her sudden entrance. At the same time, Shuji, Rina, and other candidates spotted Kanzaki using her domination ability to restrain some soldiers. She claimed she was only following orders, but they didn't believe her. Kanzaki wasn't someone who took orders from others. Then Kai showed up and clarified that she had been following his orders. Shuji was stunned to hear that Kai had killed the soldiers. Kai explained that since Erasure was busy fighting Gauss, he took it upon himself to handle the guards. That's when Shuji and the others started piecing everything together. Shuji asked if Kai had teamed up with Erasure, but Kai said he was simply doing whatever he wanted. He also told Shuji to stop bothering him and go after Erasure instead. Shuji and the others left to find Erasure and his group. Meanwhile, Leonora looked at Gauss and said he was clearly losing. Gauss admitted it. He just couldn't fight off old age anymore. Erasure declared that after everything that had happened, he wasn't going to back down like a coward. One of the candidates questioned Leonora, asking if she was the one controlling everyone. Leonora replied that while she did have control, there were other conditions involved. If someone had a large mana pool and strong resistance, her control wouldn't work as well. But those who always depended on their powers and never trained to control their mana were easy targets. Erasure called her a coward and dared her to face them directly. Leonora just smiled and said she would handle them herself and promised to break his fangs. Erasure lunged at Leonora, but she quickly summoned a massive boulder and sent him flying. Then, using her control over fire, water, and air, she easily took down the other candidates. Narumi flew in, grabbed Erasure, and took off into the sky. Suddenly, Shuji and the other candidates arrived. Shuji asked Erasure to stop and questioned what he hoped to gain from this. Erasure challenged him to stop him by force if he disagreed, saying he hated Shuji's pacifist ways. Shuji turned to the others, asking if they felt the same. Rina stepped forward, saying she supported Erasure. Leonora laughed, pointing out they were still bickering among themselves. She added that at this point, they were basically starting a rebellion and questioned whether they thought she'd forgive them even if they stopped now. Without warning, she summoned a massive cyclone, injuring everyone. Shuji tensed at the sight of his wounded comrades, but Erasure told him to calm down and said that if he truly wanted to protect them, he had to make up his mind. Otherwise, they'd all die. Realizing he had no choice, Shuji prepared to fight, joined by Rina and the others. Leonora warned them she would show them the gap between their strength and hers. Not far away, Kinzaki asked Kai what they should do. Kai replied that once Leonora used her magic to enslave the others, he'd step in. Until then, they needed to trust the candidates. Back in the fight, the candidates stood ready. Gauss managed to get back on his feet and declared that although he was weak, he still wanted to fight for Leonora. In response, she healed him completely, making him even stronger than before. The candidates were shocked. After all their effort, Gauss was back again. Rena pointed out that their numbers had grown too, so they could still fight. Leonora invited them to attack whenever they liked, saying this battle would be their test. If they couldn't beat her, then they were unworthy of being heroes. The fight began. Gauss noticed how hard it was to fight Shuji, especially with his magic sword. Leonora launched a water magic attack at Shuji, and although Rena managed to nullify it, Shuji still got injured. They tried attacking Leonora, but none of their moves landed. Meanwhile, Kai watched from the shadows and used his judgment skill to analyze Leonora's stats. He realized that while her magic was powerful, her defense was lacking. One strong physical blow might be enough. But Gauss stood in their way. Erasure told Shuji to leave Gauss to him and go after Leonora. Shuji hesitated. His magic couldn't harm her either. Just then, one of the candidates handed him a steel sword. Leonora remarked that now, he finally looked ready to fight. The other candidates couldn't help Shuji, as their powers had no effect on Leonora. They couldn't help Erasure either, since he was locked in close combat. Erasure could match Gauss blow for blow. Though Gauss was fully healed, his stamina hadn't fully recovered. Still, Erasure couldn't use his explosive power either, so the fight remained evenly matched. Leonora kept Shuji at bay with her ranged attacks, making it impossible for him to get close and use his sword. There had to be some way he could reach her and win, but he hadn't figured it out yet. Leonora smiled, saying she wasn't surprised. Only a few people in the entire country could dodge her attacks like that. Still, the fight was clearly one-sided. Since Shuji couldn't close the distance, he couldn't rely on help from the other candidates either. Then, Shuji suddenly charged at her at full speed, pushing through her wind attacks. She switched to using ground and fire magic, but he evaded those too. That's when she realized he was unconsciously using magic as a form of armor. The fact that he was growing this fast unsettled her a little. Still, she managed to fling him away using her powers. Elsewhere, Erasure had lost the ability to use his powers and was struggling to figure out how to defeat Gauss. Gauss slashed him in the abdomen with one swift move. Erasure was furious at himself for not being able to overcome an old man. Dropping to his knees, he listened as Gauss told him that this was the limit of what he could achieve without his powers. But Erasure, refusing to accept defeat, shouted that he was meant to be strong, and then landed a punch so powerful it sent Gauss crashing to the ground, bleeding. He had won. Back with Shuji, he reminded himself that if he didn't win, his friends would suffer. He stood up, and a dangerous aura began to surround him. Leonora noticed his incredible stamina, but remained calm, confident that he still couldn't get close to her. She was wrong. In the blink of an eye, Shuji was right in front of her, managing to slash her hand. She couldn't believe it, but she had no time to react. He was already behind her. Desperate, she used water magic to push him away. That's when she realized he had somehow acquired instant movement abilities. Before she could fully process it, he appeared again, just inches away from slicing her neck. In a last-ditch effort, she suddenly ordered him to kneel, and he froze in place. Smiling, she admitted she hadn't wanted to use this power, but he had left her no choice. Kai realized she had finally used her trump card and told Kinzaki to step back. Leonora smirked and said she hadn't planned to use enslaving magic, but Shuji had forced her hand. Now, he lay immobilized at her feet like a lifeless statue. The other candidates rushed in to help Shuji, but Leonora commanded them to stop, and they all froze mid-step. She told them they had done well and that she would pass them. She added that while she hadn't expected Gauss to lose, he was just a knight and easily replaceable. As long as she had control over everyone, it didn't matter. The candidates were beginning to lose hope, and without any countermeasures, defeat was inevitable. She explained to them that the reason she had been allowed to summon the candidates in the first place was so that, when the time came, she could control them freely, otherwise they might turn into threats. Suddenly, 3 knives flew at her from behind, but she easily dodged them. She calmly stated that she knew someone had been hiding the whole time. It was Kai. Kai admitted he was surprised she even noticed someone as unremarkable as him. She responded that she had found something odd about him from the very beginning. She expressed disappointment, saying she hadn't expected him to show up in such a hopeless battle. Then, she ordered him not to move, and just like that, he was caught in her spell. As she began explaining how her magic worked, a bullet struck her shoulder out of nowhere. She was stunned that he could still move and fire despite being under her spell. She asked him how he was resisting, certain her magic had been cast successfully. But before she could process it, he fired again, hitting her in the abdomen. She couldn't understand the weapon. Guns didn't exist in her world, and her defenses couldn't keep up. Kai then explained what a gun was and mentioned that he had limited bullets and didn't want to waste them. She retaliated with fire magic, but only his robe was singed. He was no longer there. The next moment, he was right behind her, gun pointed at her head. He said he knew she was weak in close combat, and her mind-controlling magic didn't work on him either. She was stunned and in denial. Kai had taken a huge risk and won. The reason was Kanzaki. That night, Kai had asked Kanzaki to dominate him with her skill. He had learned that the first skill cast took priority over any new spells. So, if Leonora tried to use her enslavement spell after Kanzaki's, it would fail. And since candidates had divine protection, their abilities were stronger than normal magic. Kanzaki had hesitated, worried her skill might be weaker than Leonora's magic. But the same principle had worked for Steady. Because he had cast a spell before Leonora did, he regained control over his monsters. It had been a gamble, but they had no better option. Back in the present, Leonora figured it must have been Kanzaki's doing, and she was right. Kai, still under Kanzaki's spell, told Leonora it was over and aimed his gun. She was captured and handcuffed. These cuffs sealed her magic, and they were the same ones used on Kanzaki earlier. Leonora asked what Kai planned to do with her. His condition was simple, send them back, and he'd let her go. But she apologized, saying it wasn't possible. She could only summon people with magic, not send them back. Kai believed her. She truly didn't have that ability. He asked how they were supposed to return after defeating the Demon King. She explained that summoning required an enormous amount of energy, and it was their god who had summoned them. So once the Demon King was defeated, the god would supposedly send them back. However, she didn't seem confident. No previous candidates had ever returned. They'd been killed by the Demon King. There might have been survivors, but they eventually disappeared. After this short exchange, Kai was ready to kill her, but Shuji stopped him. Shuji said he had only been cooperating because he believed Leonora could send him home. Since that wasn't the case, he wanted to keep his status as a hero candidate. He didn't want to be labeled a traitor. Kai asked if they weren't already considered traitors. Leonora promised to pretend none of this had happened. Shuji pointed out that killing a saintess carried a heavy punishment. They could all get into serious trouble. The other candidates agreed with him. Kanzaki, however, remained on Kai's side. Shuji admitted that killing Leonora might be the logical choice, but asked, what would they do after that? Kai understood Shuji's reasoning. But in a shocking turn, he shot Leonora right between the eyes. Her body dropped to the ground. He then used a smoke grenade and vanished. The other candidates were left stunned and unhappy with his actions. Kanzaki thought back and realized it had all gone just as Kai had planned with her from the beginning. A few hours ago, when Kai and Kanzaki were discussing their plan, he told her their first goal was to capture Leonora and find a way back home. But if returning wasn't possible, he would kill her. He understood that if they captured her and couldn't return, Shuji would try to protect her. And when that happened, Kai would kill her and escape. He was ready to shoulder the sin of killing the saintess alone. That's why he had intentionally left a few of her guard alive, so they could place the blame entirely on him. He told Kanzaki to let everyone blame him and return to the Empire. She wasn't sure she could go through with it, but he reassured her that she could, even suggesting she use her powers during negotiations to make things work. When she asked where he'd go after escaping, he told her not to worry about him. Meanwhile, in a dark and distant castle, a man was reporting his failed attempt to kill the hero candidates to the Demon King. But the Demon King wasn't concerned. He believed the heroes would eventually appear on the front lines. The game was getting interesting, and he was enjoying it. 2 days after that incident, Kai was living in the forest. He was near a city that would take about half a day to reach on foot. Since he would never be allowed inside after killing the saintess, he planned to sneak in at night. He needed money. Inside the city, he found a tavern with a warm and lively atmosphere. Someone asked where he was from, and he lied, saying he came from a nearby town and was now looking for work. The man suggested he become an adventurer. He'd get jobs from the guild and earn money. He also mentioned that the guild was desperate for new adventurers and wouldn't even ask for identification. Kai stayed at an inn, relieved that no one recognized him. The next day, he went to the town's guild. It was full of all kinds of people. At the reception counter, he registered using the fake name Siren, the same code name he used in the real world. He claimed his town was destroyed by the Demon King's army. The receptionist explained the guild system. Ranks went from F to A, with higher ranks earning better rewards. As a newcomer, he was registered as an F-rank adventurer. He walked over to the bulletin board to choose his first task. That's when 3 guys came over to mess with him. They mocked him, and though he didn't like it, he kept calm. In the last scene, we saw those adventurers surrounding Kai, warning him not to take the quest. Kai calmly turned around, thanked them for the warning, and asked them to leave him alone. That annoyed them. They thought he was being arrogant. Onlookers whispered that those bullies were at it again with a newbie. One of them lunged at Kai, claiming he needed to be taught a lesson. But Kai effortlessly stopped the attack by grabbing the guy's arm. Shocked, the attacker yelled for him to let go, and Kai calmly did. He didn't want to fight. Still, the guy told his friends to attack together. But even then, Kai easily overpowered all of them and walked out of the guild. As he left, Kai thought to himself that now he had a clear idea of the average adventurer's level, and compared to hero candidates, they were embarrassingly weak. So he decided to complete the quest as fast as possible. The scene then shifted to the forest, where Eriji Kai was thinking that, based on the quest details, the kobolds should be nearby. Suddenly, he spotted some animal-like footprints on the ground. Eriji Kai began following them, and as he moved further in, he sensed the presence of others nearby, and not just one. He also realized that these mysterious creatures were quite skilled at hiding, which made him suspect that they were indeed kobolds. Out of nowhere, a kobold launched a surprise attack from behind, but Eriji Kai sensed it in time and easily dodged. He also noticed that the kobold was holding a human sword, implying it had likely defeated an adventurer before. As he was processing this, another kobold appeared from behind and tried to attack. This time, Eriji Kai dodged again, grabbed some dust from the ground, and threw it into the kobold's eyes to blind it. While the second kobold was struggling to see, Eriji Kai quickly landed a punch on the first kobold's face, knocking it down. He then grabbed its sword and finished it off without hesitation. Seeing this, the second kobold froze in shock, but before it could react, Eriji Kai swiftly struck it down with his knife too. Afterward, Eriji Kai used his judgment skill to assess the kobold stats and realized they weren't a threat to him at all. Feeling confident, he thought it would be easy to hunt them for extra money. Soon, the scene shifted back to the guild, where everyone stared at Eriji Kai in disbelief. He had brought back the kobold's ears as proof of completing the subjugation. He asked Mia, the receptionist, if this would be enough, and she confirmed it was. She then asked if he had really handled it all by himself. Eriji Kai calmly said yes, explaining that while fighting kobolds was easy, the real challenge had been tracking them down. He reflected on how, although his combat skills were fine, his exploration abilities still needed work. Seeing him return after defeating the kobolds left everyone stunned, and they wondered if hunting kobolds was really that easy. Some even speculated that Eriji Kai might secretly be a C-rank hunter from another area. However, another person pointed out that they'd heard Eriji Kai was still a newbie. Mia then cut in, asking Eriji Kai to wait while she went inside to prepare his reward. The scene then shifted to nighttime, showing Eriji Kai walking somewhere while counting his money. He thought to himself how surprising it was to earn so much just by hunting weak magic beasts. Realizing that securing enough funds for daily living was more important for now, he decided to stay in the city and work as an adventurer. Eriji Kai figured that building connections around the guild would make it easier for him to gather information. Suddenly, someone appeared in front of him. Seeing the boy, Eriji Kai casually asked if he had any business with him, noting that the boy seemed much stronger than those he had encountered earlier at the guild. The boy introduced himself as Lyle, a B-rank adventurer and the one in charge of the city's guild branch. Eriji Kai responded indifferently with a "so what?" Lyle then asked if Eriji Kai was the one who had caused trouble with his men at the guild earlier that day. Eriji Kai calmly replied that those guys had started the fight first. In response, Lyle shouted angrily, accusing Eriji Kai of lying, saying he had heard that some unknown newbie had beaten up his men. Eriji Kai admitted that yes, he was indeed the one who did it. Hearing this, Lyle shouted that he wouldn't hesitate to teach Eriji Kai a lesson. He then tried to punch Eriji Kai several times, but to his frustration, Eriji Kai easily dodged all of his attacks. Eventually, Eriji Kai got bored, and with a swift leg sweep, he tripped Lyle, making him fall to the ground. Stunned, Lyle exclaimed in shock. Eriji Kai calmly commented that although Lyle had good speed, his moves were too rough and left too many openings. Hearing this, Lyle became even more furious and attacked again, demanding to know what Eriji Kai meant by that. But once again, Eriji Kai blocked his strike by grabbing his hand and quickly slammed him to the ground. Eriji Kai explained that he believed Lyle wasn't used to fighting humans since most of his quests likely involved magical beasts. In anger, Lyle asked why Eriji Kai had attacked his men when he had such overwhelming strength. Eriji Kai replied that he had already said it was just a misunderstanding and offered to explain everything from the start. Later, the scene shifted to the guild, where Lyle apologized to Eriji Kai, admitting it was his mistake. He even scolded and punished his men for lying to him, acknowledging that he was at fault for believing them too easily. He shouted at his men, demanding they apologize to Eriji Kai. Reluctantly, they apologized after Lyle's insistence. Eriji Kai replied that he didn't mind as long as the misunderstanding was cleared up. Eriji Kai then mentioned that he had a question. Lyle apologized again and assured him that he would answer anything. Eriji Kai explained that he was a traveler and had registered as an adventurer to earn money for his journey. He then revealed that there was another reason he became an adventurer. Curious, Lyle asked what it was, considering Eriji Kai's immense strength and mysterious background. Eriji Kai replied that he was searching for a way to travel to another world. Hearing this, Lyle and his men were stunned and asked him to explain further, wondering if such a thing was even possible. One of them mentioned hearing stories about hero candidates coming from other worlds. Eriji Kai confirmed that he was indeed talking about finding a method to enter the world of those hero candidates. Lyle responded, guessing that such a method likely involved magic, but admitted that neither he nor his men knew much about it. Eriji Kai agreed, knowing that such information wouldn't be easy to find, but he hoped Lyle's group might have some clue. Lyle then said there might be only one person who could help, someone called the sage Albanacarrot. Confused, Eriji Kai asked who Albanacarrot was. Lyle was surprised by his lack of knowledge and explained that Albanacarrot was an elf whose advice had greatly benefited the country. Upon hearing this, Eriji Kai recalled hearing about that name somewhere before. He remembered reading in books about an elven sage and explained that elves were rare beings, often believed to exist only in legends, living deep within forests and rarely venturing outside. Eriji Kai concluded that an elf who had left their forest and gained great wisdom was naturally known as a sage. Lyle mentioned that he had heard Albanacarrot had been alive for over a century and was widely known for great wisdom and vast knowledge. He also said Albanacarrot was a famous spellcaster with deep expertise in magic. Hearing this, Eriji Kai began to wonder if elves were naturally gifted with strong spiritual connections that helped them excel in magic. He also thought that even if there wasn't a specific spell to return heroes to their original world, perhaps magic could still make it possible. Suddenly, Lyle's subordinate, Raka, interrupted, asking whether the sage Albanacarrot was still alive, saying he had never heard of this person and that no one had ever seen them. Lyle just laughed and admitted that he didn't have any information about that. He then apologized to Eriji Kai for not being able to provide any helpful details. However, Eriji Kai assured him that the information was still useful to him. Eriji Kai then mentioned it was getting late and that he would head back to the inn. Hearing this, Lyle curiously asked what Eriji Kai planned to do once he found a way to travel to another world. Eriji Kai simply smiled and gave a vague answer, telling them to use their imagination. Confused, they watched as Eriji Kai left for the inn. A week later, the scene shifted to the guild, where Mia handed Eriji Kai his reward for completing the quest. After receiving the reward and stepping outside, Eriji Kai reflected on how a week had already passed since his conversation with Lyle and his group. During that time, he had saved up some money. Suddenly, Lyle and Raka approached him, asking if he had completed his quest and suggesting they go for drinks together. However, Eriji Kai, with a strange and somewhat distant look, declined their invitation. Seeing this, Lyle commented that Eriji Kai was really boring, and they left after saying goodbye. As he walked down the street, Eriji Kai thought about how he had finally gathered some information about the sage. He had learned that the sage's name was Elbana, who had served as the country's advisor about 10 years ago, but was now retired and living near the western border, the very place where the nation was currently fighting against the Demon King's army. Araji then decided there was no reason for him to stay in the city any longer and resolved to visit the so-called sage Elbana. The scene then shifted to the holy Temple City Alpha, where the hero candidates were having a meeting with someone. Heinrich, the captain of the Holy Knight Order's 8th Knight Corps, mentioned that it had been a month since he took on the responsibility of overseeing the hero candidates, replacing the duties of the fallen saintess. Heinrich then asked Midashuji if he had any complaints so far. Midashuji replied that he had none, indicating everything was fine since Heinrich was handling things well. Heinrich seemed pleased upon hearing that, saying the hero candidates were valuable assets to the nation, and he treated them with the respect they deserved. Hashimoto thanked Heinrich for his concern, but couldn't help noticing how different he was from Leonora. Still, she sensed there was something suspicious about the situation. Heinrich then shifted the discussion back to the main topic, mentioning that in the previous day's meeting, it was decided to mobilize the hero candidates. Midashuji was surprised and asked if he was right in understanding that they were being sent to the front lines. Heinrich confirmed it, explaining that battles were still raging on the western border. He then showed them a map, pointing out the fort where they would be deployed. Midashuji acknowledged it and was about to ask about the earlier promise, but Heinrich interrupted, assuring that he would keep his word to protect those unfit for battle. Midashuji gratefully thanked Heinrich for his reassurance. Heinrich went on to explain that they would be assigned tasks in the meantime, stressing that everyone needed to contribute and prove their worth. Midashuji agreed, recognizing the practical benefit of working. Hashimoto then asked when they were expected to leave. Heinrich responded urgently, suggesting they depart the next morning. He also asked Midashuji to inform everyone and ensure they were ready for the trip. After the meeting, as Midashuji and Hashimoto walked back, Hashimoto expressed relief that Heinrich had agreed to their request. Midashuji admitted he had been worried that their demands might have been too much, but was glad things worked out. Hashimoto speculated that the knights probably lacked confidence in handling the hero candidates without Leonora, which might explain their more humble attitude. Midashuji agreed, noting that Leonora's absence would make the knights more cautious. Hashimoto then wondered about Araji, curious about where he had gone and what he was doing now. The scene then shifted to the past, back to when Leonora was killed and Araji left the hero candidates. The bishop, visibly tense, questioned who could have killed Leonora. Nagase Rina answered, revealing that the culprit was Araji, who had been one of the hero candidates. The bishop and his guards were shocked at this revelation. The bishop quickly asked about Araji current location. Nagase Rina responded that Araji had escaped, remarking on how fast he was for a traitor. The guards started discussing among themselves, debating whether they should immediately send an inquisitor if Araji betrayal was confirmed, or first verify if Saintess Leonora was truly dead. Arashur Shinsuke angrily asked the bishop to clarify his words. The bishop explained that he wasn't directly denying their claim, but suggested there was a possibility that all the hero candidates had plotted together to eliminate Leonora. At that moment, Midashuji grew tense. Suddenly, Leonora's knight stepped forward and stated that he had witnessed the incident himself. He revealed that Midashuji and the others had indeed tried to protect the saintess, but were ultimately overpowered by Araji, which led to Leonora's death. Another knight confirmed the same account, leading the bishop to say that he was inclined to believe the story since her own knights were verifying it. The bishop then asked about Araji power, wondering if he was truly that strong. Midashuji confirmed it, explaining that Araji had been hiding his true strength all along. The bishop then invited them to continue the discussion privately in his chamber and requested that one of the hero candidates accompany him. Meanwhile, unknown to them, Kanzaki was secretly eavesdropping behind a wall, using her abilities to spy on the knights. Midashuji felt relieved that they had successfully managed the situation, thanks to Kanzaki's help. The scene shifted back to the present, where Hashimoto asked Midashuji if he was still concerned about Araji, suggesting that worrying about him was pointless. Midashuji gave a slight smile and agreed on the surface, but deep down, he admitted to himself that he was still bothered. He couldn't ignore the fact that Araji had sacrificed himself for their sake. Midashuji felt tense, having vowed to protect everyone. Yet Araji had taken that burden upon himself, leaving Shuji feeling helpless and unable to do anything for him. Later, inside the room, Shuji gathered everyone and announced that they had received orders to mobilize to the front lines. He instructed all combat-ready personnel to prepare for departure by the next morning. Some of the boys grew nervous as the weight of facing an actual battle hit them. Nagase Rina walked up and bluntly remarked that it was too late to be scared now, reminding them that they had willingly chosen to join the combat group. Hano Shirori then asked whether they were the only ones being sent to the front lines. Shuji replied that they would be going along with the 8th Night Corps under the command of Captain Hainer. Kinzaki then asked Shuji if there had been any news about Ariji Kai. Shuji explained that the temple had placed a bounty on Ariji Kai's head and had sent a large number of personnel to hunt him down. However, there had been no updates regarding his location. Hearing this, Kinzaki looked visibly upset. Shuji was about to offer some comfort, but before he could, Nagase Rina suddenly shouted in anger that she didn't care if Ariji Kai was a traitor or not. If she ever saw him, she'd burn him to ashes. Kinzaki, overwhelmed with sadness, wondered why Ariji Kai hadn't taken her with him. Then, the scene shifted to the jungle, where all the hero candidates, knights, and guards were traveling together. As they ventured deeper, Erishur suddenly sensed something and stopped. At the same time, Hano Shirori complained loudly, saying she was tired and asked if they could rest. Hashimoto responded firmly that they had just taken a lunch break, so resting again wasn't an option. It looked like they would be marching until nightfall. Some of the boys began to whisper, wondering if anything would ever happen since they had been walking for 2 days without incident. Suddenly, Erishur ordered everyone a halt. The others asked if something was wrong, and Erishur replied that he could sense the presence of a magical beast lurking behind the bushes. A knight soon arrived and angrily yelled at the hero candidates for stopping without permission. Shuji explained that they had detected a magical beast nearby. The knight, dismissive, barked that he couldn't see anything and reminded them that they had to follow his orders since they couldn't act without his approval. Hearing this, Erishur lost his temper, grabbed the knight by the neck, and demanded to know what he just said. The knight, clearly terrified, nervously asked what Erishur was doing, and even Shuji tried to calm Erishur down, urging him to stop. But Erishur, furious, shouted back, questioning why he should follow orders from a useless knight. Suddenly, a creature attacked Erishur, forcing him to let go of the knight and dodge quickly. It was a magical beast with the face of a rabbit, but armed with deadly, weapon-like hands. The guards grew alarmed and shouted that it was a sharp rabbit, urging everyone to prepare for battle. But before they could even react, the sharp rabbits charged at them, easily knocking their swords away. One sharp rabbit then glared menacingly at a guard and prepared to strike. But before it could, a powerful flame appeared out of nowhere and incinerated the beast. It was Erishur who had unleashed his power to defeat the creature. The guard thanked Erishur for saving him, but Erishur coldly told him to step aside and not get in his way. Without hesitation, Erishur continued to wipe out the sharp rabbits one after another with ease. Some of the students watched in awe, amazed by how destructive his power had become, far beyond what they had seen from him before. However, despite his overwhelming strength, Erishur remained unsatisfied, feeling that his power still wasn't enough to match Ariji Kai's. The scene then moved to a moment where Ariji Kai pointed a gun at Leonora. Seeing this, Erishur grew furious at Ariji Kai once again. In truth, Erishur felt frustrated because right from the start, Ariji Kai had shown no fear towards him, proving that Ariji Kai was clearly stronger. Ariji Kai's calm and indifferent reaction only confirmed this belief in Arashi's mind. Erishur then admitted that although he had gained explosive power and believed himself to be stronger, it irritated him to realize that Ariji Kai was still more powerful. Then, the scene shifted back to the present where Shuji interrupted Arashi's thoughts, asking why he looked so annoyed. Erishur simply replied that it was nothing, though he admitted he didn't like being ordered around by someone he considered useless. Sometime later, the scene switched to the western border of the Daguerreist Holy Kingdom, at Fort Truss. There, Captain Amelia of the Holy Knights introduced herself as the leader of the Station Night Order. Heinrich then asked Amelia what had happened to the watchdog captain. Amelia replied that the captain had died about a week ago. This news slightly shocked the hero candidates. Amelia then said she wanted to let them rest after their long journey. But before she could finish speaking, the guards suddenly shouted that the Demon King's army was approaching to attack. Amelia, smiling brightly, remarked that since everyone had heard the news, there was no time for rest and that she was counting on them. Shuji agreed and told the hero candidates to get ready for battle. Erasure looked extremely determined and prepared to face the upcoming fight. The guards rang the alarm bell, shouting that the demon army was approaching. The large number of monsters left Max stunned, making him wonder why there were so many of them. Heinrich ordered the guards to start firing immediately and reduce the enemy numbers before they got too close. The guards began shooting arrows, and the fire magic knights hurled fireballs at the monsters. However, even after being hit by arrows and fireballs, the monsters kept advancing, shouting about their desire to wipe out the humans. Midashuji was shocked to see that the monsters were still pushing forward despite the heavy attacks. Amelia calmly explained that these monsters wouldn't go down so easily and warned the hero candidates not to underestimate the monsters' stamina and toughness, reminding them that humans were much weaker in comparison. Midashuji nervously asked Amelia what they should do next. Amelia told Shuji to follow Heinrich's commands and orders, adding that she herself would lead the Fourth Order Knights in direct combat against the monsters. Heinrich then mentioned that he was about to say the same thing, but noted that some people were already down there fighting the monsters. Confused, Midashuji asked Heinrich who he was talking about. Nagase Rina then informed Shuji that Heinrich was referring to Erasure and his group, who had already gone down earlier. Shuji was stunned and asked Rina to repeat what she had just said. As the smoke began to clear, they saw that humans had stepped forward to face the monsters directly. The monsters began laughing, mocking Erasure and his group as idiots walking to their deaths. But Erasure simply responded that he didn't care whether they were demons or anything else. He would erase them all from existence. And with that, the battle between them began. Inside the fort, some monsters managed to break through a wall and launch an attack on the guards. Just as one of the monsters was about to strike down a guard, Midashuji stepped in, blocking the blow with his sword. Even the guard was stunned to see him. Without wasting a moment, Midashuji unleashed a stronger attack, extending his sword and quickly defeating the monster. Afterward, he felt confident in his ability to handle the situation, realizing his power was still growing. He then shouted to the others, encouraging them by saying that this was a battle they could win, urging everyone to fight without fear. Hearing his words, every hero candidate was filled with enthusiasm. As Midashuji got ready to fight again, he reminded himself not to hesitate, knowing that any sign of doubt from him could shake the team's confidence since he was their leader. He thought back to how Arajikai had taught him the harsh price of being naive. Meanwhile, Hashimoto called out to everyone, urging them to stop watching and join the battle alongside Midashuji. Nigase Rina began launching attacks, and Kinzaki started overpowering the monsters. The fierce battle between the monsters and the hero candidates raged on. Watching the hero candidates fight, the guards were amazed by their strength as they overwhelmed the Demon King's army. Heinrich then shouted to the guards, telling them to support the hero candidates so they could push back the demons. The guards agreed and charged into the fight, joining forces with the heroes in a long and intense battle that eventually ended with the defeat of the Demon King's army. Amelia excitedly declared their victory, and the guards erupted into celebration. As the sun began to set, Midashuji stood silently, lost in deep thought. He was soon approached by Heinrich, who asked if it was his first time fighting in such a way and how he felt about it. Midashuji admitted that it was difficult learning to handle battles on such a large scale. He explained that during the fight, his focus had narrowed, making it hard for him to issue commands properly. Heinrich praised Midashuji's efforts and also credited the hero candidates for their crucial role in the victory. However, he warned them to stay alert, reminding them that while they had only faced mid-level enemies with smaller numbers this time, the high-ranking demons would be much more dangerous due to their superior strength. Hearing this, Midashuji became serious and promised to keep Heinrich's warning in mind. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the Demon's Den, where a monster was reporting their defeat to Stone Gaia, one of the 4 heavenly kings of the Demon King's army. The monster apologized for failing its mission, which enraged Stone Gaia. The scene shifted to the vast great forest of Ekot, where Araji Kai was making his way. As he approached the forest's edge, he thought to himself that his journey to meet the sage was finally nearing its end. But all of a sudden, Kai sensed something heading towards him, tongues shooting out to strike him. He narrowly dodged them, surprised by their incredible speed, and wondered what sort of strange tongues they were. Looking around more carefully, Kai soon spotted some unfamiliar magical beasts. Using his system, he identified them as tongue baboons. After analyzing their stats, Kai found them to be relatively average creatures. The tongue baboons launched another attack, but Kai effortlessly avoided their strikes. However, noticing that they were closing in quickly, he swiftly showed off his agility by leaping away to dodge once again. As the baboons lashed at him with their tongues once more, Kai immediately unsheathed his knife and sliced through the tongue mid-air. The creatures were shocked by his sudden move, and Kai didn't stop there. He kept slashing until he had completely severed the entire tongue. One baboon tried attacking with its tail, but it was too sluggish compared to Kai, who dodged it without difficulty and quickly finished it off. Witnessing this, the remaining baboons froze in fear, unsure of how to respond. Now, furious, Kai provoked them, asking if they were going to charge at him or if he'd have to go to them and end them himself. Later, the scene shifted again. The ground was now littered with the corpses of the tongue baboons. Kai reflected on how stronger magical beasts seemed to be appearing more frequently. He wondered whether it was because he was nearing the Demon King's territory, or perhaps because this forest was far from towns where adventurers and knights usually roamed. As he went deeper into the forest, he thought that the farther he traveled, the higher the chance he'd encounter untouched, powerful magical beasts. Thankfully, his appraisal skill had helped him spot these creatures, and he reminded himself to stay cautious going forward. The scene then transitioned to another time, where Kai finally arrived at Mount Urano, a natural barrier that slowed down the Demon King's army's advance. Kai explained that the highest peak there was called Reaper Wolf Mountain, and there was a rumor that Sage Albana lived at the summit. Trying to recall his memory, Kai remembered that there should be a small village at the base of Reaper Wolf Mountain. But as he reached the village, he was stunned to find it engulfed in flames. He suspected that the Demon King's army had attacked it. As it turned out, his suspicion was correct. Monsters were present in the burning village. From a rooftop, hidden out of sight, Kai observed them carefully. He thought it odd, since this place was supposed to be far from the front lines, making him even more determined to remain cautious. The monsters discussed their next move, asking their leader, Hector, whether they should just massacre the villagers. Hector, however, told them to stop the killing and instead suggested enslaving the remaining humans. He then asked if they had gathered any information about Albana. One of the monsters confirmed they had, stating that the sage indeed lived at the peak of Reaper Wolf Mountain. Hector grew visibly irritated upon hearing this, annoyed that their intelligence was accurate. He reminded them that their top priority was to capture Albana, the sage. Hector then ordered the monsters to camp in the village for the night and prepare to climb the mountain the next day. One of the monsters voiced concern, warning that Reaper Wolf Mountain was known as the nesting ground of the Reaper Wolfen, ferocious, untamable beasts. He believed that unless they defeated these creatures, they wouldn't be able to reach their target. Another monster questioned the reason for such fear. The first one explained that domination magic wouldn't work on beasts with high intelligence. He also mentioned hearing that although the 4 heavenly kings had once tamed a dragon, doing the same with the Reaper Wolfen would be impossible. Hector admitted he wasn't particularly adept at magic either, saying there was no point in discussing powers they didn't have. Their only option was to fight and defeat the Reaper Wolfen head-on. The rest of the monsters agreed with his reasoning. Seeing this, Kai noted how well-organized the group seemed under Hector's leadership, and he wondered whether such coordination was due to the influence of a high-ranking demon. When Kai checked Hector's status, he realized that Hector was indeed one of the rare high-ranking demons within the Demon King's army. Kai understood immediately how difficult it would be to face Hector in battle. Suddenly, Hector sensed that someone was watching them. He ordered his subordinates to search the area. Kai was impressed by how sharp Hector's senses were. While the monsters began searching for him, Kai felt relieved, confident in his exceptional skills at hiding and staying undetected. All of a sudden, Kai noticed that some humans had been captured by monsters. They were all tied up with ropes. But even after seeing the captured villagers, Kai chose not to interfere. His main goal, just like the demons, was to locate and meet the sage, Albana. He knew he had to climb the mountain before the Demon King's army could. The scene shifted to the highest peak of Oregana Mountain, a treacherous place also known as Reaper Wolf Mountain. Somehow Kai had made it this far. When he checked his map, there was no marked trail, so he decided to follow the paths made by wild animals. He also realized that his vision was blurry and the ground was unstable beneath him. Even though he was in a rush, he decided to proceed carefully. As he moved deeper, Kai sensed someone nearby. He suspected it could be the rumored wolves that lived on Reaper Wolf Mountain. He listened closely and soon realized that there weren't just 1 or 2, but 3 distinct sounds, and they kept increasing. Kai quickly understood that even though these wolves stayed hidden, their presence was overwhelming. Suddenly, out of nowhere, he found himself completely surrounded by them. They were ready to attack, but Kai reacted fast. He jumped and perched himself on a nearby tree. From there, he finally understood why so many people had mysteriously vanished on this mountain. He used his appraisal skill to analyze the wolves' status and found that their stats were average. However, their greatest strength was their teamwork. While Kai was still analyzing them, one of the wolves suddenly charged at the tree, smashing it in half. Realizing he had no time to waste, Kai grabbed a leaf, infused it with mana, and used it as a weapon to strike the wolf. In an instant, the wolf was sliced in half and killed. More wolves lunged at him, but Kai struck them down the same way using the leaf. 2 more were killed easily. Now, a group of 5 to 6 wolves were closing in together. This time, Kai decided to infuse mana directly into his own body. He believed that if he did this consciously, the result would be far greater. He remembered Leonora's words. She had once said that those who depended too much on divine protection were usually bad at controlling their mana. She had also mentioned that people who always relied on divine protection were unable to manage mana at all and, in her opinion, were nothing but weaklings. That's why back then, she could easily dominate them with her enslavement magic. Kai knew he had to improve and overcome this weakness. He believed that mastering mana control would also help him resist enemy magic better. Although mana wasn't as overwhelmingly powerful as divine protection, Kai knew it was crucial for becoming stronger in this world. Determined, he continued fighting the wolves while practicing his mana control as he climbed higher up the mountain. Suddenly, he sensed something unusual and quickly headed in that direction. There, he encountered the leader of the wolves. Without hesitation, Kai asked the leader to confirm something. The other wolves were confused by his actions, but when the leader attacked, Kai instantly defended himself and took it down without mercy. As soon as their leader fell, all the other wolves turned and fled. After all, their leader had been the most powerful magical beast among them. Kai then chased after the fleeing wolves on his own. To his surprise, something incredible happened. He saw a red-colored duplicate version of the wolves. Watching this, Kai wondered if his skill was now showing him the future movement paths of the wolves. His guess was right. The ability really did let him see the future movements of his enemies. With this newfound power, he quickly defeated 2 more wolves. Kai realized that his predictive ability allowed him to glimpse roughly 1 second into the future. Seeing this, the remaining wolves were terrified. However, Kai firmly ordered them not to even think about escaping and instead demanded they stay and continue training with him a little longer. After a while, Kai had finished wiping out all the wolves. When he checked his status, he discovered that his new skill, Divine Protection of Foresight, allowed him to predict the future movements of his enemies. Reflecting on his growth, he recalled how gaining the weak point detection skill had caused his appraisal skill to level up as well. This progression had essentially upgraded his blessings from normal to enhanced, and now his appraisal could see everything in his surroundings. Feeling drained, Kai decided to take a break, but just as he was about to rest, he suddenly sensed something strange. Wondering if the Demon King's army had arrived, he abandoned the idea of resting and rushed toward the source of the presence. The scene shifted to a mountain peak, where an elven girl named Mayor had been captured by monsters. Hector, their leader, admired her resilience, noting it was only natural for someone trained by the sage. But then he coldly declared that this was the end for her and ordered the monsters to kill her. Mayor was just about to say something when one of the monsters suddenly lunged at her. Before the attack could land, Kai appeared out of nowhere and swiftly carried her in his arms to dodge the blow. Mayor was left stunned. She couldn't believe a human had saved her. One of the confused monsters questioned who Kai was and whether he was a new enemy. Kai quickly assessed the situation and realized there were 10 monsters in total, with Hector being a high-ranking demon. Mayor then asked why he had helped her. In response, Kai asked if she was a disciple of Sage Albanicaret. When she confirmed it, Kai explained that he had business with the sage, which was his reason for stepping in. Using his appraisal skill on Mayor, Kai learned that she was a half-elf and had spellcasting abilities in her skill set. Hector then declared he didn't need to ask who Kai was. He was clearly the enemy. Without wasting time, he ordered his monsters to kill both the elf and the human. Kai knew that if he wanted to protect the girl and gain the sage's favor, he had to defeat the monsters. As they charged at him, Kai activated his foresight ability to predict their moves. The skill worked perfectly. It allowed him to anticipate their attacks and block them efficiently. The monsters were left shocked, and in a swift sequence, Kai finished them off one after another with his knife. The remaining monsters were left frozen at the sight. Kai thought to himself that as long as his foresight was active, he was practically unbeatable in close combat. However, he was concerned about how long the skill would last and how many minutes he had left. Meanwhile, Hector told his monsters not to rush in and instead use magic from a distance. The monsters obeyed and began firing magic bullets at Kai. Seeing them, Kai tensed up, realizing how dangerous they were. But before the attacks could hit him, Mayor used a wind spirit spell from Syl and blew all the bullets away. Surprised, Kai asked if it was a spell. Mayor confirmed it was and explained that it was spirit magic, a power only elves could use. She thanked him, saying that thanks to his help, the spirit could finally rest a little. Hector, now irritated, admitted they wouldn't win like this and decided to enter the battle himself. Seeing this, Kai grew serious and asked Mayor, referring to her as Elf, to stop the other monsters while he handled Hector. Mayor agreed, but also asked him to stop calling her Elf, saying her name was Mayor. Kai acknowledged her and called her disciple of the sage, which only frustrated her more. She shouted again that her name was Mayor, but quickly gave up and told him to just forget it. Then, Kai faced Hector head-on. He quickly realized how powerful Hector really was. During their sword clash, Kai used Hector's own weapon as a springboard to launch himself into the air and attacked with his knives. But Hector blocked it with his sword and immediately counterattacked. Kai dodged and managed to slash him in return. The attack landed, and Hector was surprised that Kai had predicted his move, admitting it was a solid attempt. But Kai was equally stunned to see that the wound was real. It wasn't just a scratch. That's when the weight of the situation hit him. Realizing how dangerous a high-ranking demon really was, he knew that if it weren't for his foresight, he'd already be dead. Hector remarked that if Kai wasn't human, he would have easily defeated him. In response, Kai used his appraisal skill to inspect Hector's status and discovered that, aside from his superior physical strength and sharp senses as a high-ranking demon, Hector also had swordsmanship at level 5. Realizing he was clearly outmatched in a direct fight despite having foresight, Kai decided to change tactics. Hector shouted that if Kai wouldn't approach him, then he would go after Kai himself. Even so, Kai managed to evade Hector's attack, though eventually, Hector's strike left a cut on Kai's hand, making him nervous. He understood that his future predictions were useless if his body couldn't keep up physically, as the gap between them was simply too wide. Hector laughed, mocking Kai for just running away. Suddenly, Kai pulled out his gun and fired at Hector, but Hector easily blocked the bullets with his bare hand thanks to his reflexes. Despite that, Kai was slightly relieved to see that the bullets had pierced Hector's hand, injuring him. Shocked, Hector demanded to know what kind of weapon Kai was using, calling it outrageous. Furious, Hector lunged at Kai, who tried shooting again, but Hector swiftly dodged and warned him not to underestimate his ability to predict bullet trajectories. Running out of bullets, Kai resorted to throwing knives, but Hector deflected them with his sword. Then, out of nowhere, Kai suddenly stopped and calmly sat down on the ground. Before Hector could react, Kai threw a bomb at him. Hector was puzzled by the object and rushed to strike Kai, but before he could close the distance, the bomb exploded, stunning the surrounding monsters. Even the mayor was shocked, wondering about Kai's true identity as he showcased such remarkable abilities. She noticed that Kai, despite being human, was holding his ground against a high-ranking demon. Meanwhile, Kai gripped his knife, knowing that he had no ammo left for his gun and that the grenade had been his last option. Watching Hector arise again, Kai realized weapons like guns and grenades wouldn't be enough to take him down. Now enraged by Kai's use of strange weapons, Hector launched a fierce attack. In that tense moment, Kai chose to activate his weak point detection skill, but first he had to thoroughly study Hector's moves. As Hector prepared to strike, Kai analyzed the attack's future path and identified the weak spot, his neck. Kai positioned himself perfectly and waited with his knife. Hector, unaware, moved right into Kai's trap, driving himself onto Kai's blade, which pierced his neck. Stunned, Hector couldn't believe Kai's accuracy. Kai silently admitted that weak point detection was indeed powerful, but drained his mana quickly. Feeling his energy fade, he slumped to the ground, alarmed by his mana depletion. The surrounding monsters saw that their leader Hector was dead, but noticed Kai's weakened state and started advancing toward him. The mayor also grew anxious, realizing her own powers were spent, but she still wanted to help Kai to repay his efforts. Just as the monsters charged, someone suddenly unleashed a fire spell, engulfing and wiping out the entire group in flames. Kai observed that the fire's intensity was on another level, far beyond what Nagase Rina could produce. Then, a voice from beside the mayor apologized for arriving late. The mayor's face brightened, addressing the newcomer as master. Hearing this, Kai immediately realized that she was the sage Albana Carrot, the one he had been searching for. Albana thanked Kai, recognizing that he had been trying to help her disciple. Kai humbly replied that it was merely coincidence, then asked if she really was the great sage Albana Carrot. She confirmed with a yes, joking that she was now just an old and weak woman compared to her past self. Kai tried using his appraisal skill on her, but his mana was too low. Still, he knew from instinct alone that she was incredibly powerful, far beyond his capabilities, leaving him no choice but to be honest with her. Albana asked if he had business with her, and Kai replied affirmatively. She remarked that no one would seek her without a reason and thanked him for saving her disciple, promising to answer his question sincerely. The mayor then suggested that they return home, noting the heavy smell of blood and the risk of wolves appearing. Albana agreed and invited Kai to join them, saying he also needed rest. Kai accepted, and as he walked alongside them, he thought to himself that everything had worked out well so far, and helping her disciple had definitely been worth it. The scene then jumped ahead to a point where Kai and his group had reached Albana Carrot's house. Once inside, the mayor mentioned that she was going to take a bath. Kai then questioned Albana Carrot about why she chose to live in such an isolated area. Albana Carrot explained that there were several reasons, but the main one was her desire to return to nature. Even after retiring, many people still tried to take advantage of her. Kai replied that he understood her reasoning, since her home wasn't exactly easy to reach. Albana Carrot added that once in a while, skilled individuals like him would visit her, and she wasn't the kind of person to turn away those who sought her help. Kai then straightforwardly told her that he was one of the hero candidates chosen to defeat the Demon King. Albana Carrot responded by saying they were part of the third generation of hero candidates. She also admitted that although she had heard rumors, she didn't expect the summoning to have already taken place. Hearing about the third generation left Kai shocked, and he remembered Leonora's words that hinted at previous summoning attempts. Albana Carrot then revealed that another group of heroes had been summoned around 4 years ago, the second summoning, and the first one had taken place about 10 years earlier. Both groups had been sent to defeat the Demon King, but were completely wiped out. Because of those disasters, the summoning ritual had been sealed away, never to be used again. However, Saintess Leonora had been trying to break that seal to summon the third generation. Albana Carrot admitted she had opposed this from the beginning, believing it was foolish to entrust the fate of their world to outsiders, no matter if it was by divine will or not. Calmly, Kai mentioned that he had already dealt with Leonora, meaning they wouldn't be able to summon more people from another world. Albana Carrot found it hard to believe, thinking it would be impossible for him to defeat Leonora. But Kai simply smiled and remarked that there were many ways to defeat someone, even if there was a big difference in strength. Hearing this, Albana Carrot laughed, admitting it seemed true, though she still found it amusing that Leonora had been beaten by her own pawn. She also commented that she now understood Kai's wish. After all, it was natural to want to go home. She then said she wasn't one for long conversations, so she got straight to the point. She couldn't use her magic to send them back home. Kai was shocked and disappointed by this, asking if she knew any other way for them to return. Albana Carrot explained that while summoning was possible with human magic, sending someone back wasn't feasible anymore, as that kind of knowledge had been lost long ago and no one had researched it since. Kai noted that Leonora had said the same thing and asked if, in short, their only option was to defeat the Demon King. Albana Carrot replied that it seemed that way, though it might also be achievable through some kind of demonic arts. Upon hearing about demonic arts, Kai said he would have to look into that next. Albana Carrot apologized for not being able to help further, but thanked him for saving her disciple. She promised that if she found any useful information, she would inform him. Kai expressed his gratitude, and in response, Albana Carrot smiled, suggesting that maybe he really could defeat the Demon King. Kai admitted that he didn't want to take on such a troublesome task, but if there was no other choice, then he'd have to do it. Seeing the fierce anger and killing intent on Kai's face, Albana Carrot grew tense. She felt he was different from the previous hero candidates she had met before. It was as if he had been raised in a dark and harsh place. Finally, Kai thanked Albana Carrot for her time and asked her to contact his other identity, Siren from the Adventurers Guild, if she discovered anything helpful. Albana Carrot then decided to leave Mayor in Kai's care. Just then, Mayor came out of the bathroom after finishing her bath and suggested that Kai should also take one, since he must have gotten dirty from the mountain climb and the battle. Kai agreed, saying she had a point, and decided to bathe. But before that, Albana Carrot stopped them and said she had a suggestion. Curious, Kai asked what it was. Albana Carrot then asked if he would consider taking her disciple along on his journey. Mayor was stunned and asked in surprise if by disciple she was referring to her. The scene then shifted to the eastern region of the Valdora demonic kingdom, right at the front lines of the battlefield with the holy kingdom of Daguerreast. Kai and Mayor were traveling toward their destination. Apparently, Kai had to bring Mayor along on this journey. While walking, Kai remarked about the nice weather, mentioning how he'd heard that the weather in demonic territories was usually harsh. In response, Mayor explained that the land they were standing on had only recently belonged to the Holy Kingdom, and the weather would likely get worse the deeper they went into Valdora Kingdom. Kai realized then that this land had been overtaken by the Demon King's army. Mayor also pointed out that near the western area of the Urano mountain range, there was a large city called Nutrat, surrounded by nearby villages. She further explained that Nutrat had now fallen under the Demon King's army and had become the front lines, exactly where they were headed. She estimated it would take them about 2 days of walking to get there. Kai hesitantly asked about the fate of the villagers who once lived there. Sadly, Mayor revealed that half of the population had been killed, while the rest were captured and forced into labor by the demons. A few had managed to escape across the mountains. Hearing all this, Kai silently nodded, impressed by her deep knowledge, feeling that bringing her along had been the right choice. Then, the scene briefly flashed back to the past, showing when Albana had asked Kai about taking Mayor with him on this trip. At first, Kai had refused, which shocked Mayor, making her shout at him to at least reconsider. Albana laughed at Kai's reaction and advised Kai not to speak so bluntly. She pointed out that for someone who was still new to this world, Mayor could be very helpful thanks to her vast knowledge passed down through generations. Albana also admitted that she had been looking for a chance to send Mayor on a journey, but was hesitant about sending her beloved disciple off alone. Hearing this, Kai looked puzzled and asked Albana why she was entrusting Mayor to him instead of taking her herself. Albana explained that even though she looked young and healthy by human standards, she no longer had the ability to travel herself. She added that after someone had suddenly appeared and saved Mayor's life, this seemed like a good opportunity. Mayor also expressed her gratitude, though she said she needed some time to think about it. But before she could finish her words, Kai cut in, warning that he was planning to infiltrate demon territory and it would be a dangerous trip. He firmly stated that if she became a burden, he would leave her behind. At that, Albana gently reminded Mayor that the decision was hers to make since it was her life. Mayor fixated on those words, her life, and soon declared that she understood and was ready to go with Kai. Back in the present, Kai commented that Mayor looked exhausted. He reminded her they still had a full day of walking ahead, in case she'd forgotten. Mayor replied that he shouldn't expect too much from a spellcaster's body, even though she had been trying to train physically alongside her magic. Hearing that, Kai suggested they stop for the day and take some rest. Mayor was surprised and reminded him that he had previously said he'd leave her behind if she slowed him down. But Kai brushed it off, asking what nonsense she was talking about, assuring her that he wouldn't abandon her for something like that. He then told her to hurry up and set up camp. Mayor, impressed by his unexpected kindness, smiled and said she understood, promising to have it ready in a few minutes. The scene then transitioned to nighttime, where Kai and Mayor sat quietly around a bonfire. While Mayor was eating, Kai kept glancing at her with hesitation. He finally spoke, pointing out that she probably already understood the road ahead would be dangerous. He made it clear that even if things got risky, he wouldn't hesitate, because he was set on returning to his home world. But he also admitted that, unlike him, Mayor might not have such a strong reason to continue the journey. Kai then asked if he was right in assuming Albana hadn't lied, that Mayor had her own reasons for joining him. Mayor replied that it was hard to explain, but she had suffered great loss. Her old home, the Elven village, had been destroyed by the Demon King's army. Hearing this, Kai questioned if the war wasn't supposed to be between humans and monsters. Mayor replied that such lines didn't matter. Demons had attacked all races. She revealed that her parents and even her younger brother had been killed. She only survived because her father had sacrificed himself to draw the monsters away. She couldn't do anything at the time, and once the Demon King's army moved on, they'd left her for dead. That's when Albana found her, took her in, and became both her mentor and master. Kai told her he wasn't asking out of curiosity about her past. He just wanted to know what her goal was. Mayor responded that he should have already figured it out. She became Albana disciple and trained in magic solely to gain the strength needed to defeat monsters. Her eyes burned with rage and vengeance as she said everything she had learned over the last 10 years had been for one purpose: revenge. She vowed to personally destroy the one who had murdered her family. Kai, clearly surprised, asked for the demon's name. Mayor replied it was Wimberg, one of the 4 heavenly kings, the heavenly king of the wind, and a top commander in the Demon King's army. Kai asked if that's why she had agreed to join him, so she could get closer to Wimberg. He also admitted he currently had no personal reason to fight the demons. Mayor then added that she didn't understand why Albana had allowed her to travel with Kai in the first place. Since they were on the subject of their masters, she confessed she had no idea what Albana was thinking, and for now, she'd simply follow Ari's instructions. Kai said he understood. He recalled Albana words asking him to take care of Mayor, realizing she probably hadn't wanted Mayor to chase revenge blindly on her own. It made sense now why she hadn't let her disciple travel alone. Mayor then apologized for dragging such a heavy topic in the conversation and told Kai not to worry. She didn't plan to drag him into her revenge. Kai respected that she wanted to handle it herself. He told her to call in night and get some rest since they had to continue traveling the next day. Mayor agreed and said she placed some spirit guards around the camp that would alert them in case monsters came close. While Mayer slept peacefully, Kai sat in silence, thinking about the 4 heavenly kings of the Demon King's army. Watching her sleep, he quietly stepped outside the tent. His thoughts wandered to his former opponent, a powerful demon, and now he was facing another, even stronger one. He realized they had to grow a lot more powerful if they were going to stand chance. But for now, he pushed those thoughts aside, knowing that worrying wouldn't help at the moment. The scene shifted to the western corner of the Holy King Fort, where high-ranking officials gathered. They believed that with the hero candidates now ready, it was the perfect moment to launch an attack. Others agreed and began discussing where they should strike first. Amelia suggested that retaking Fort Arliss would be a smart move. It used to be theirs, after all, since it was now the enemy's frontline base. Crushing it could force them to retreat. However, Heinrich raised concerns, calling the idea reckless. He pointed out that they'd been defending all this time. So why the sudden change in strategy? One of the top officials challenged him, asking if it really mattered that the hero candidates were his subordinates. Amelia acknowledged Heinrich's concerns, but argued that the enemy likely still underestimated them, so a surprise offensive could work. She then asked Midashuji if his body had been discovered. Midashuji confirmed it had, and said if ordered, he was ready to wield his sword in battle. Following that, Heinrich, Midashuji, and Hashimoto left. Heinrich mentioned the operation would be carried out the next day and noted how unusual it was for Amelia to be this assertive. Hashimoto Mirai then asked if Heinrich thought the plan would go well, pointing out how confident everyone had seemed earlier. Midashuji replied that if they were going to attack anyway, it was better to do it now while the enemy was still reorganizing, so he didn't think it was a bad decision. Heinrich, however, cautioned that they were placing too much trust in the hero candidate's strength and abilities, which could lead to overconfidence. He added that while their own side was just strengthening defenses and not directly involved in planning, they couldn't go against orders from above. Hashimoto asked nervously, "We didn't really have a choice, did we?" Heinrich reassured him, saying that of course he would give his full support, but the hero candidates were still the central force in this plan. He asked that they be told to get proper rest for the mission ahead. Suddenly, Midashuji tensed up, feeling an unexplained sense of unease, but at this point, there was no turning back. The next day, the scene moved to the outskirts of Fort Arliss. The hero candidates stood ready, along with Heinrich's team, prepared to launch the assault. Nagase Rina wondered aloud why they were attacking in broad daylight. Wouldn't a nighttime ambush be more effective? Heinrich explained that demons could see perfectly in the dark, so a nighttime attack might actually give the enemy an advantage. Midashuji then clarified their objective. They needed to eliminate the monster leader while the main force kept the rest of the monsters occupied. He warned the hero candidates that their target was likely a high-ranking demon. He told them that he would take the lead in battle, and if he wasn't nearby, they should either buy time or retreat. At that moment, a guard approached Heinrich with a message from the main force. It was time to begin the operation. Heinrich gave the signal for Midashuji and the others to charge forward without hesitation. Everyone launched into the assault and stormed the fort. Amelia rallied the troops, yelling for them to wipe out the monsters. But unbeknownst to them, their every move was being silently watched by none other than Stone Gaia, the king of the demon army. A few seconds later, the scene shifted to Heinrich and several hero candidates stepping into the main tower of the fort. The monsters inside froze for a moment, then launched an attack, but Midashuji swiftly wiped them out within seconds. Heinrich warned him not to lower his guard, pointing out that the enemy's leader could still be lurking nearby. Just then, they were suddenly ambushed by monsters from both sides. Some of the hero candidates looked to Midashuji for direction, and Heinrich stepped in, telling him to trust the 8th Night Order to cover their rear and focus on reaching their target. Midashuji agreed and called out to Nagase Rina. She confidently replied that she didn't need a reminder. She already knew her job was to clear any monsters blocking their path. Rina unleashed her powers, and the others quickly followed, defeating the monsters ahead. But as they pushed open the large door, they were taken aback by what they saw, a humanoid figure standing before them. Sam nervously asked what on earth this thing was. Erishur wondered aloud if this could be their leader. That's when Stone Gaia revealed himself, declaring that he was one of the 4 heavenly kings of the Demon King's army. Hearing this, Kenzaki Rin and Hashimoto tensed up. Even Midashuji could feel the overwhelming pressure coming from Stone Gaia. It was nothing ordinary. Stone Gaia unsheathed his sword, challenging them to a test of strength. Midashuji ordered everyone to get ready, though deep down, he was forcing himself to stay brave. He knew that if they lost here, all the sacrifices made by their main force would be for nothing. Everyone braced themselves, but instead of attacking, Stone Gaia suddenly sat down and placed his hand on the ground. Confused, Midashuji watched as an orange circle began to glow around him. The hero candidates grew tense. Then, dirt surged from the ground, and a whole swarm of golems emerged in front of Raka and the others, leaving them stunned. Stone Gaia commanded the golems to attack and eliminate the heroes. Shuji quickly instructed everyone to hold the line. Narumi confirmed and immediately started slicing through the golems using razor-sharp leaves powered by nature magic. Erasure joined the fight too, blasting through them with fiery punches. He laughed, saying that no matter how many of those slow-moving things there were, they were no match. But then, Stone Gaia activated a spell that made the shattered golems regenerate right in front of them. The heroes were shocked. How were the golems putting themselves back together? Still, they kept fighting, breaking the golems down again, only to see them regenerate once more. At one point, Raka was almost hit by a golem, but Kanzaki jumped in just in time and used her domination ability to control a few of them. But when another person struck one of the golems, it still fought back. Hashimoto furiously used her telekinesis to destroy some of them. But again, they began regenerating. Erasure voiced his frustration, realizing the golems just wouldn't stay down. That's when Narumi remembered a common theme from the manga he used to read. Defeating the summoner usually ended the chaos. He suggested to Shuji that they take care of the golems, while Shuji went after the summoner directly. Shuji nodded, agreeing that he and Erasure would go after Stone Gaia. The two charged toward him with full force. But Stone Gaia just smiled and said they were underestimating him. He used his magic again, summoning large stones from the ground and launching them at Shuji. Shuji tried to dodge, but to his horror, the stones followed his movements like they were locked onto him. He couldn't avoid them and ended up getting hit. Everyone shouted his name in concern, but Shuji reassured them he was okay. In truth, this was all part of his plan, a distraction to give Erasure the opening to strike from behind. The plan worked. Erasure snuck up and landed a massive flame-infused punch from behind. Everyone held their breath, waiting to see if the attack was enough to defeat Stone Gaia. But as the smoke and dust cleared, they saw that Erasure had punched straight into a wall made of dust and clay. Suddenly, that very wall retaliated with a blow to Arashi's gut, knocking him unconscious. Stone Gaia burst into laughter, mocking them and asking if that was really all they had to offer. And with that, the story paused at a cliffhanger. What happens next? Will Shuji and the others find a way to beat Stone Gaia, or will they fall right here? While Shuji and the rest of the class party were busy battling one of the four heavenly kings, Stone Gaia, Kai had made it to the fallen city of Nutrat. Judging by the situation, they had to take a rather unconventional route to avoid drawing attention. With only the glow of a fire spell atop a scepter lighting their path, they ventured deeper into the city's underground. Somehow, Mayor had been convinced to move through the city's disgusting sewer system, holding her nose the entire time. Kai, on the other hand, didn't seem to mind the horrid smell. She had to admit, she never would have imagined sneaking into a fallen city through an underground sewage system. Kai simply asked her to be a little more patient since they were close to their destination. They just needed to stay cautious, especially because demons had superior night vision and Nutrat's design featured many open areas. Plus, it was a frontline city, so its security was naturally tight. After a few more minutes of walking through the stinky sewer tunnel, they finally found an exit. Just like that, they managed to infiltrate Nutrat without being noticed, though they now reeked like absolute crap. The moment they stepped into the actual city, Kai felt an ominous feeling. His senses flared, warning him someone was nearby. With no time to waste, they dove into a barrel like it was straight out of a 90s cartoon. A few seconds later, two demon guards strolled by. One of them was grumbling about being selected to guard the witch. The job wasn't handed out because of achievements, but more on a skill basis. Though the guy clearly lacked motivation, he had the talent for the role. Still, that didn't save him from getting scolded by the witch. Once the guards disappeared down the street, still complaining about their command structure, Kai and Mayor climbed out of the barrel. Kai was curious about this so-called witch. According to what he knew, she was the demon princess and the newly appointed governor of Nutrat. Mayor, however, recognized her as the Witch of Space, and she was their current target. Before heading out, a flashback revealed a moment where the sage suggested to Kai that meeting the Witch of Space, who lived in Nutrat, might be the key to fulfilling his wish. They had made it into the city, sure, but actually reaching the princess would demand precise planning. A full-on confrontation was not something they could afford. A trained assassin would need to gather intel while staying in the shadows, and that was exactly what Kai was planning to do. Mayor had sworn not to get in the way and promised to follow his lead to make it through this mess. At this point, the fallen city had become a stronghold for demons, a base where they could regroup and plan their next conquest. All around, you could see demon soldiers simply going about their lives, laughing with their buddies, drinking, and getting hammered in broad daylight, basically behaving like degenerate humans. Using the abandoned houses for cover, Kai and Mayer quietly observed the city's current condition. Mayer even found it oddly boring, as nothing seemed out of place. Demons were just living their day-to-day lives. Kai believed that as long as a species had intelligence and could speak, they'd live similarly to humans. But Nutrat wasn't as peaceful as it appeared at first glance. Some of the original human residents had been turned into slaves, forced to help the demons with logistics and building their new homes. The demons treated these slaves brutally, never hesitating to beat them with sticks if the mood struck. Mayer was shocked at the level of cruelty. She had known that demons commonly enslave humans. It was no secret, but actually witnessing it in person was another matter entirely. The beatings, initially just violent discipline, soon turned into a form of entertainment for the bored soldiers. Mayer couldn't just sit there and watch this madness any longer. Just as Kai was about to calm her down, he suddenly sensed a presence so strong it couldn't be ignored. It materialized right in the room. The presence spoke in a small, cute voice, asking if they weren't demons. A young girl with crimson eyes, dressed in a lavish outfit and 2 dark horns on either side of her head, stood there curiously watching the intruders. Kai's instincts kicked in. He panicked. He hadn't noticed this unknown presence at all, which was a bad sign. He immediately pulled out one of his throwing knives, preparing to react, but the girl calmly told him there was no need to be alarmed. She wasn't here to fight. Kai, still suspicious, demanded answers. Who was she, and how did she find them? At his level of awareness, no one should have been able to sneak up on him like that, especially at such close range. The only explanation was that she must have used demonic arts. She admitted she had been watching them since they triggered her detection barrier. But Mayer was certain they had entered cleanly. She hadn't sensed any mana trace around. That's when it clicked. The girl was a witch who had mastered the demonic art of space. She could see everything. Realizing who they were dealing with, Kai quickly used appraisal to confirm her identity. Her name was Isabel Veldora, under the protection of the evil god, master of the demonic art of space, master of all elemental demonic arts, and a complete monster when it came to stats. Then Isabel officially introduced herself as the 5th princess of the Veldora demonic kingdom. Kai instinctively took a step back, clearly intimidated. Isabel warned them that if they didn't answer her questions, she would simply order her army to arrest them. A human and an elf sneaking into her territory? They didn't seem like spies, but she still needed answers. Kai understood that fighting here would be a bad idea. Negotiating was their best option. So, he decided to explain everything, warning her that the story was going to be long. Isabel, clearly bored and looking for something to do, made herself comfortable and told him to go ahead. After hours of recounting his journey, Isabel finally understood why Kai wanted to return to his homeworld. He'd heard from the sage Albana that it might be possible through the demonic art of space, so he came here to find out. Isabel casually confirmed that it was, in fact, possible to send him back. For the first time in a long while, Kai had a solid lead. He was lucky the Witch of Space was willing to talk. She didn't carry the usual demon hatred toward humans, and that made her different. But she pointed out one big problem. The process required the exact coordinates of his homeworld. And with countless worlds out there, finding Earth's coordinates was like finding a needle in a cosmic haystack. They all went silent for a while. Kai and Isabel exchanged serious looks. He asked if there was any way to pinpoint Earth's coordinates. But the problem was the number of parallel worlds. Too many possibilities to narrow down the right one. Kai activated his new ability, the Eye of Truth, and couldn't detect a single trace of deceit in Isabel's words. She then mentioned another limitation, his mortal body. Kai was protected by God's will, which made it impossible for Isabel's demonic arts to bypass. Even she couldn't override divine protection. As long as that remained, he was basically trapped here, unless the mission to kill the Demon King was completed. Isabel herself wasn't certain about that part. She hadn't thought that far ahead. While Kai didn't get a concrete solution, at least now he knew there was an alternate path. Still, the simplest and most direct method remained. Kill the Demon King and fulfill the prophecy. Kai didn't say it aloud, but Isabel could see in his eyes. He was leaning toward that route. He was open to the idea of using demonic arts to return home, but it wasn't going to be easy. Suddenly, Mayer interrupted and asked why a princess of the demonic kingdom was being so cooperative. In response, Isabel casually ripped open the fabric of space and explained that even the demonic kingdom had its factions, and she was simply acting in her own interest. Kai and Mayer braced themselves for a fight, expecting her to make a move. But Isabel just stared at them with her blank, emotionless eyes, wished them luck, and stepped into her spatial rift. Before disappearing, she warned them, escaping her city wouldn't be easy. And just like that, the rift closed, and Isabel vanished to who knows where. Mayer, who had been holding her breath the entire time, finally let out a sigh of relief. Kai was deep in thought about how terrifyingly powerful the Demon King's bloodline truly was. If they had ended up fighting her, they would have been wiped out without a chance. Thankfully, she hadn't shown any hostility. But even after such luck, Kai couldn't shake off the fear that misfortune might be right around the corner. And just as the mayor scolded him for jinxing things, the city's alarm went off. They rushed to the window and saw demon soldiers going berserk over a group of human spies who had somehow snuck into the city. There was no doubt now they'd been exposed, and Kai was almost sure the witch who had helped them escape earlier had a hand in it. She'd casually wished them good luck, then immediately notified her army. Her actions were just as unpredictable as she was. At times like this, Kai figured there was no point trying to understand how someone that powerful thought. Using the rooftops of old, abandoned buildings, Kai and the mayor attempted to flee the sprawling fallen city. Kai was quick, but the mayor wasn't far behind. Working together, they managed to avoid the eyes of the thousands of demons swarming the streets. Judging by how the troops were stationed, the inner city was clearly under tight surveillance. Even a basic glance told them these soldiers weren't pushovers. They had high stats and were more than capable of causing serious problems. They needed to get out fast, but then Kai suddenly froze in place. The mayor had to slam on the brakes, so hard she nearly fell off the roof. He yanked her down to hide, eyes locked on the city square. There, Kai sensed a mana signature that felt eerily similar to Isabel's, though potentially stronger in specific ways. He needed to confirm it before they made another move. In the center of his troops stood a demon with white hair, porcelain skin, and 3 horns, 2 curving out from his temples and 1 big green one jutting from his forehead. Kai would never forget that face. It was Wimberg. He hadn't expected to see a wild card like that show up here. When he glanced at the mayor, she looked like she was ready to explode, completely consumed by vengeance. Maybe following Kai had been the right move after all. Still staring at her target, she confirmed that the demon leading the army was none other than Wimberg, the heavenly king of the winds, one of the demon king's vassals. From the rooftop, Kai quickly used appraisal to scan him. Wimberg's stats were evenly balanced, and he was a master of wind attribute demonic arts, swordsmanship, and had a skill called Hawk's Eye that boosted his combat ability to another level. Kai tapped the mayor's shoulder, silently telling her to cool it. Charging in now would be insane. Thankfully, she managed to calm down, realizing that taking on the heavenly king of the winds wasn't something they could afford right now. Wind magic was excellent for scouting and tracking, so they had to be extra cautious. Back on the ground, Wimberg's troops debated whether intruders were really in the area. They had mobilized a full-on hunting unit, just based on Wimberg's instinct. But if there really were intruders, then eliminating them would be the natural next step, especially since the hero candidates had already appeared at the front lines, and Nutrat City was under pressure to stabilize things. One of his subordinates asked Wimberg why he wasn't leading from the front, accomplishing great feats like the others. He simply replied that holding the rear suited him more. Let the other units handle the messy, violent work. Then, the wind that he had previously spread throughout the city returned with faint whispers, confirming the presence of intruders. If the wind told him so, then it was as good as confirmed. The spies were being careful, but they wouldn't be able to escape from Wimberg's wind-based detection. By manipulating the air currents, he practically had a full view of the entire city. Without hesitation, Wimberg gave the order to get the pursuit unit ready. They were officially entering a full-scale hunt. He also figured Isabel must have been the first to detect the intruders, and yet she let them go. That intrigued him. Mayer and Kai kept running for their lives, using the deserted residential areas as cover. When they reached a street corner, Kai signaled Mayer to halt. A demon search party had entered the area, inspecting every inch to locate the intruders. They'd clearly noticed movement, but hadn't yet locked onto their exact location. Mayer, meanwhile, had sensed something off. The wind had been acting strange for a while now, stirring up restless spirits. It had to be that annoying wind tracking skill trying to sniff them out. Mayor could disrupt it with her spells, but doing so would immediately give away their position. Since they hadn't been spotted yet, they had to be smart and relocate before they were surrounded. Demonic soldiers patrolled the area, eyes darting around sharply. The duo kept low, staying close to the lowlands to dodge the weird wind flow, but it was only a matter of time before the demons caught on. And with Mayor's stamina dropping, they were finally detected. Kai quickly decided to use the city's structures to their advantage, but the plan required Mayor to act as bait. Without even waiting for her response, Kai darted across the rooftops, leaving Mayor down below, grumbling. To keep her focused, he reminded her that revenge was still on the table. Now wasn't the time for tears. Once the demons noticed the split, they zeroed in on the elf girl, assuming she'd be the easier catch. Some were also sent to hunt down the elusive Kai. Mayor finally stopped fleeing and spun around, casting a spell. She called on the fire spirits to grant her salamander's power, halting the demons mid-charge. But before they could even process what was happening, they were roasted, both literally and figuratively. The flashy attack, however, gave away her location, drawing in even more demon troops. While all eyes were on Mayor, Kai used the distraction to strike. He leaped behind the battalion and began carving his way through them, one deadly slash at a time. The first kill landed clean, and the others hadn't even noticed yet. With fast and brutal strikes, he shredded the group into pieces. Eventually, the battalion captain turned around, alarmed by the strange, repeated thuds behind him, only to see his entire unit lying dead in pools of blood. That split second of fear was all Kai needed. The captain insulted him, calling him a coward, but Kai responded with another gory execution, wiping him out instantly. Meanwhile, Mayor was still stuck in the streets, casting Undine, a water spell, to hold back the wave of demons. The spell worked well in tight spaces, staggering the enemy's advance. The violent current kept pushing them back, but the demons still tried to push forward with all they had. Mayor knew she was only delaying the inevitable. There was no end to them. It was a losing battle. But then she noticed something strange, splashes at the rear, rapid and unnatural. Demons at the back were suddenly collapsing. It gave her breathing room to keep pushing with her spell. Throats were slit cleanly and swiftly, ending each enemy without drama. One demon finally turned to check on his falling comrades, but it was too late. A throwing blade slammed into his skull. In that final moment, he felt like he met the god of death, Shinigami. Kai slipped through the ranks of the demon army, painted in their blood. After recovering his blades, he casually complimented Mayor for being such a good decoy, saying it made his job a lot easier. She appreciated the praise, even though she nearly died in the process. The duo may have done a good job hiding their movements, but Wimberg was starting to lose patience. His army wanted to summon more allies, but he felt that bringing in extra demons would only lead to more unnecessary deaths. So, the Heavenly King Wimberg decided to take on the task himself. Meanwhile, Mayor and Kai had almost reached the exit when a powerful gust of mana-infused wind interrupted them. The moment they were exposed, tracking wind missiles came rushing toward them. Staying composed, Mayor summoned Sylph, the wind spirit, to counter the attack. Her spell managed to cancel out the momentum of the wind missiles. Kai braced himself, knowing the real threat had now entered the scene. Wimberg hovered above, controlling the wind at will while observing the entire city. He admitted to himself that these intruders were more than just pests. Mayor stared at the man who had destroyed her life, hatred boiling within her. This was her long-awaited shot at revenge, and she wasn't going to hesitate. She had been preparing for this moment for over a decade. As Wimberg floated in the sky, surveying the battlefield, Mayor and Kai drew their weapons, ready to face him. Kai, however, understood that they couldn't drag this fight on. Mortals like them wouldn't survive a prolonged battle against a heavenly king. They needed to win fast, and that meant going all out from start. Mayor was of the same mindset, her concentration sharp as ever. She once again summoned Sylph, this time conjuring deadly wind blades that homed in on Wimberg. But Wimberg was unimpressed. The idea of someone using wind magic against the wind heavenly king himself was almost laughable. It was either an act of bravery or pure stupidity. With a mere thought, he neutralized the wind blades by overwhelming them with his own wind, not even letting them touch his barrier before they scattered like dust. Though the attack failed, it did give Kai a small opening. Wimberg had blocked his own vision to dispel the attack, and Kai attempted to take advantage. But before he could get close, Sharp and solid wind projectiles stopped him in his tracks. From above, Wimberg laughed, mocking Kai for trying such a foolish move. He was a veteran. His wind search spell allowed him to keep constant track of every enemy on the field, meaning Kai's usual sneak tactics were completely ineffective. Luckily, Kai wasn't alone. He had Mayer. She lifted her scepter and began casting another spell. Wimberg noticed her actions immediately. She was interfering with the wind currents, which were essential for his wind search technique to function properly. That single spell made his omnipresence crumble. It hit Wimberg that the elf girl was deliberately targeting his weakness. She knew exactly how to disrupt his style. Kai realized she must have been planning this moment of revenge for years. It all made sense. With the wind currents broken, Kai quickly began moving, cloaking himself, and trying to get closer. Wimberg saw this and scoffed at the idea that a mere human would try such basic tactics on him. Still, Kai reached Wimberg in the sky. But the Demon King simply rose even higher, mocking Kai for attempting to challenge him in his own domain. This made things even more complicated. Wimberg's flight technique was just like Narumi's. But before Kai could think further, Mayer shouted for him to jump. Trusting her without hesitation, Kai leaped. This time, she backed him up with a powerful boost of wind magic, launching him through the air, giving him the ability to fly. Wimberg was caught off guard as Kai activated both foresight and weak point detection to land a killing blow. For a second, he saw the future, Wimberg dodging to the side, and a weak spot opening up at his throat. But in a blink, the weak spot vanished. Kai had never experienced anything like it. One moment, he had the kill, the next it was gone. That's when he realized Wimberg had changed his entire fighting style and drawn his weapon, a sleek, straight sword glowing with green wind energy. The fact that a mere intruder had forced him to unsheath it deeply offended him. Now, Kai found himself trapped in midair with a heavenly demon ready to kill. A storm of sword strikes came raining down, swift and deadly, enough to shred through flesh. Even with his overpowered foresight ability, the attacks were just too fast. That made sense. Wimberg was the one who originally taught swordsmanship to Hector, the demon Kai had previously defeated in the mountains. While Kai was locked in combat and fully focused on overpowering the assassin in front of him, the Heavenly King failed to notice Mayer entirely, nearly getting crushed by a massive boulder aimed to kill. Seizing the moment, Kai pulled back to regroup and rethink their strategy. The odds were clearly against them, but both he and Mayer were dead set on taking down this one Heavenly Demon King today. Even with the use of demonic wind arts, that boulder would have been a nightmare to deflect. Mayer definitely had a few tricks up her sleeve. Kai was beginning to realize just how much anger and pain she had bottled up, and so did Wimberg. He quickly figured out that these two intruders were responsible for Hector's death. Mayer drove the point home by asking Wimberg how it felt to lose someone he actually cared about. The demon just laughed in a dark, threatening tone and recognized Mayer as the lone survivor from the village he had ravaged. She had been relentlessly training her magic all these years, preparing to finally get justice for what happened a decade ago. But Wimberg started to taunt her, describing the day of the attack in unsettling detail. Mayer hadn't expected this monster to remember what he did to her hometown. But not only did he remember it, he reveled in it. He said he loved hearing the elves cry, because they always care more about others than themselves. Watching them beg for mercy, seeing the anguish on their faces, he found it so beautiful, it made his horn twitch with anticipation. That sickening confession lit a fire in the young elf. Furious, she charged in without a second thought, until Kai quickly stopped her, reminding her not to fall for such obvious bait. He needed her spells, so she had to stay calm and focus for the team. Snapping back to her senses, Mayer remembered this wasn't a solo fight. Kai still needed time to read the battlefield, but he was the kind of guy who'd do whatever it took to win. So it was only a matter of when, not if. Wimberg, meanwhile, wasn't just some brute. He had a mix of long-range and close combat attacks that were genuinely dangerous. Still, even he could tell that this duo was proving to be a pain. The man, in particular, was managing to trade blows with him despite being human. That only led to one conclusion. Kai had to be one of the hero candidates. Wimberg pointed it out, and Kai didn't bother denying it. But what really threw the Heavenly King off was the fact that despite always keeping an eye on strong figures from the enemy's side, he'd never once heard of someone named Kai. That made him an unpredictable outsider. After thinking it through, Wimberg decided to play it safe. He'd drag out the battle and let his superior stats wear them down over time. Kai's foresight skill only had 3 minutes of juice left, and if they couldn't finish the fight before that ran out, their chances of winning would pretty much hit zero. Mayor suddenly spoke up, asking Kai to hear her plan. As she leaned in to whisper it in his ear, Kai listened carefully but stayed alert. Eventually, he agreed to go along with it, though he couldn't resist teasing her not to slow him down. Funny enough, that line should have been hers, since it was her plan. Wimberg watched them plotting and chatting, clearly amused and confident that victory was his. Kai, now fired up, locked his gaze onto the target with fresh determination, while Wimberg casually welcomed the challenge with a smug smile. The first step of their plan was simple: get Kai airborne using wind magic. As Kai got ready to clash again, the mayor stayed on the ground and summoned the earth spirit, Norm, to control a barrage of boulders. She launched them straight toward the demon, hurling them into the sky. Wimberg, being a master of wind, easily redirected the attack. The boulders shot past him and into the stratosphere, nowhere near hitting their mark. But even that brief moment of distraction was all Kai needed to try and take advantage. Unfortunately, Wimberg's reflexes were too fast, and the first part of the plan failed. But Mayor wasn't ready to quit. She took back control of the boulders that had been flung away and made them loop around to strike from behind. Wimberg could either dodge or put up a wind wall, neither of which should have been a problem for him. But Mayor had already predicted that he'd rely on his magic. So, she summoned Sylph again, using her own wind magic to interfere with Wimberg's defense. The boulders pierced through his weakened wind barrier and headed straight for him. The goal wasn't to deal heavy damage. It was just to crack open his defense. And it worked. With sharp instinct and an eye for weak points, Kai seized the moment. Wimberg lifted his sword in time to block, but Kai's blade technique was too smooth to be underestimated. In one fluid motion, blood sprayed over Nutrat City. But Wimberg had guessed wrong. Kai wasn't aiming for his heart. He was going after the demon's sword hand. Thanks to the perfect setup, Kai snatched the blade out of Wimberg's grip and backflipped to safety. The shock of losing his weapon distracted Wimberg just long enough for the boulders to smash into his body from behind with brutal force. Yet, despite the hits, the Heavenly King stood tall, completely unharmed. The attack may have broken through his defense, but he was far too resilient to go down so easily. Mayor stood stunned. She had hoped that their smart combo would finally get her revenge. Meanwhile, Kai kept his focus locked in, still strategizing the takedown of a much stronger foe. He remembered what the mayor had whispered earlier. Wind demonic arts were weak against Earth, and she could keep disrupting Wimberg's wind magic with her own. Killing a demon like him required a solid plan and perfect execution. But Kai had tweaked the plan to focus only on creating openings to exploit, figuring it'd be a more effective route. At least they had managed to take Wimberg's weapon. Even so, Mayor was still unsure. Wimberg was famous for his superior wind demonic arts, so losing his melee weapon might not change much. Wimberg seemed to know it too. And to top it off, it didn't even seem like Kai was a proper swordsman in the first place. Wimberg licked his wounds, and they began to heal rapidly. He launched another volley of wind missiles at Kai, forcing him to deflect the attack with his sword. Seizing that opportunity, Kai closed the distance again, swinging his glowing blade. To Wimberg's annoyance and shock, he suddenly found himself unable to track Kai's movements. With every swing, Kai pushed him further back. Wimberg wasn't just any swordsman. He was exceptional. Being overwhelmed by a human like this was completely unheard of. Taking advantage of the chaos, Mayor cast a wind spell targeting Wimberg's lower half. A simple gust was enough to knock him off balance. As he fell, Wimberg saw Kai tracking his descent with precise timing. Their eyes met, Kai's burning red against Wimberg's fading ones, as Kai raised his sword high. Refusing to go down easily, Wimberg focused all his strength into his middle horn, hardening it and making it grow thick and vine-like. Wind energy surged to the tip, forming a deadly blade aimed at Kai. But he was a split second too late. Kai adjusted perfectly and brought the fight to its conclusion. The heavenly demon's head was sliced off and fell with his lifeless body. Kai landed like a hero not far from it. But the moment he hit the ground, his mana was drained, and his foresight vanished. Astonishingly, Wimberg still clung to life despite being decapitated. In disbelief over his loss, he used his final breath to ask Kai how he moved so differently. Kai revealed it was thanks to the divine blessing of Copycat, an ability that let him mimic his opponent's skills with just his eyes. While fighting, he had copied Wimberg's sword style completely. Kai admitted he had no prior knowledge of swordsmanship, but this ability had turned out to be incredibly useful. Wimberg concluded that Kai must be blessed by the god of creation. That power alone made him humanity's ultimate trump card. To twist the knife, Kai added that he got copycat after killing Wimberg's disciple, Hector. With his last breath, Wimberg cursed Hector for being stupid enough to let a threat like Kai survive and grow. Kai sat amid the debris of the battlefield, pondering what to do next. He now had a clear idea of how powerful one of the 4 heavenly kings was. That meant 3 others remained, each likely just as strong, and the Demon King himself was undoubtedly far more dangerous. Plus, the Demon King had powerful bloodlines like Isabella on his side. Kai admitted he wasn't strong enough yet to take on the final boss, and he sighed. He looked up to see Mayor approaching Wimberg's corpse, her face expressionless. She asked if it was done. Kai confirmed it was. Curious, he asked how it felt to finally get her revenge after so many years of planning and hoping. Mayor said she felt nothing. She had risked everything for this moment, and yet felt no joy, only a small sense of relief, like a burden had been lifted. Wimberg may have died, but her parents and the villagers he destroyed were never coming back. Still, it felt like she was finally free from her past. Kai admitted he was glad to have her there. Without her perfectly timed support, he wouldn't have stood a chance. But the same was true for her. She'd been preparing for this for 10 years, but couldn't have done it without Kai. She was genuinely grateful. Even if it had been about revenge, Kai had helped her reach her life's goal. From Kai's point of view, their goals just happened to align. It wasn't something that needed thanks. Mayor, now used to his detached attitude, still believed she had made the right choice by following him. If she had stayed with the sage, she would have acted rashly and probably died. Her master had probably known that too. Now that her mission was over, Kai asked what she planned to do next. She hadn't really thought about it, and admitted she felt a bit lost. Kai suggested she find a new purpose. Elves lived long lives, after all. But Mayor reminded him that she was only half-elf, so her lifespan wasn't that long. For now, she wanted to continue traveling with Kai. He asked if she was sure, since his goal was to kill the Demon King. That actually worked out for her. If the Demon King died, fewer people would suffer as she had. Even if Kai told her not to come, she'd follow him anyway. Selfishly, maybe, but she meant it. This time, Kai didn't push her away. Instead, he outlined the next step: gather as many clues as possible before reinforcements arrived. Seeing Kai wasn't against her tagging along, Mayor lit up with happiness. And so, the two of them slipped out of Nutrat City after taking down one of the 4 heavenly demon kings. Suddenly, a spatial rift silently opened in the sky, and from it, the witch Isabel appeared, standing at the top with her usual lazy gaze. The princess calmly observed as the duo slipped away into hiding. She admitted to herself that Kai and the mayor had performed better than she had expected. At first, she figured they might only be useful if they managed to survive and escape, but instead, they had actually taken down Wimberg and killed him. Her blank expression slowly shifted into a smile. With the help of that human and elf, making her move would now be a whole lot easier.